My name is Carenza James, and I am 29 years old. Just last week, I stood in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway of a lockdown memory care facility, listening to heavy, magnetic doors slide shut and lock with a deafening click. On the other side of that reinforced glass were my parents. They were pounding their fists against the pane, screaming my name, demanding I turn around and take them home. They told the attending orderlies I was a monster. They swore I had kidnapped them and stolen their lives. But what the orderlies did not know, and what my parents did not realize until the exact moment those locks engaged, was that they were the ones who handed me the keys to their own permanent imprisonment. Months ago, they marched into my Scottsdale office and demanded I walk away from my $140,000 career to become their unpaid live-in servant. They told me my older sister was far too important to be burdened with their care. They brought an ultimatum and expected me to fold. Instead, I brought a notary. I am going to tell you exactly how I turned their toxic entitlement into a state-mandated permanent residency. I promise you the look on their faces when the judge stamped the final involuntary conservatorship order is a story worth staying for. Welcome back to Morning Revenge. If you have ever been the daughter expected to sacrifice everything while the golden child sacrifices nothing, tell me your age in the comments and subscribe. Let me show you what happens when the scapegoat stops begging for love and starts reading the fine print. Let me take you back to a Tuesday afternoon in October. The Arizona sun was glaring against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, baking the asphalt in the parking lot below. Inside, the air conditioning hummed a steady, freezing tune. I am a senior retirement asset planner. Arizona is the elder care capital of the country, defined by highly sophisticated senior living networks and strict legal frameworks. I spend my days analyzing nine-figure trusts and navigating the rigid laws governing adult guardianship in places like Sun City and Scottsdale. I know what a comfortable decline costs, down to the final cent. The heavy oak door of my office swung open. There was no knock, no receptionist buzzing to clear them, just my mother Barbara and my father Thomas walking onto my carpet as if they held the deed to the building. Barbara dropped her handbag onto my glass conference table. The metal hardware clacked sharply against the surface, vibrating into the silence. I stared at the bag. It was a Prada Galleria oyster gray Saffiano leather. Retail price, $3,400. I knew the exact price because I had analyzed a client's discretionary spending the day before. It was a very bold choice of accessory for a woman about to claim impending destitution. Thomas did not bother to sit down. He leaned against the back of an ergonomic chair and looked at my framed certifications on the wall with practiced disinterest. "We are selling the house in Sun City," he announced. His voice held no room for discussion. "Closing is in 3 weeks." I kept my hands resting flat on my legal pad. I felt the rough grain of the paper under my fingertips. "Where are you moving?" I asked. "Your guest suite," Barbara said. She brushed a piece of invisible lint from her pristine cashmere sweater. "We are getting older, Carenza. Your father has a bad back. My arthritis is acting up. We cannot manage that large property anymore. We need care." I looked at the Prada bag again. Then I looked at my mother's freshly manicured hands. Not a single joint looked swollen. Her posture was perfectly straight. I swallowed the dry taste of copper in my mouth. "If you need care, I can liquidate some of your index funds to cover a live-in nurse," I said. My voice was level. It was the exact tone I used to de-escalate panicked clients during a market dip. Thomas scoffed. He crossed his arms, his jaw setting into a hard line. "We are not paying strangers to live in our house when we have a perfectly capable daughter. You have that sprawling house in Chandler. You do not have a husband. You have the time." "I have a career," I said. "I manage portfolios for 200 families." Barbara let out a slow, deliberate sigh. It was a sound I knew in my marrow. It was the soundtrack of my childhood. The sound of failing to measure up to their impossible standards. "Your sister is a partner at her law firm, Carenza. Valerie is far too successful and busy to handle this. You know the kind of pressure she is under. We cannot disrupt her life. There it was, the golden child. Valerie got the elite private tuition paid in cash, while I worked 3 part-time jobs to fund my state college degree. Valerie's law career was a sacred monument they practically worshipped. My financial planning career, despite the salary, was treated like a trivial hobby to be discarded the moment they required a servant. "So I am supposed to resign," I said. I felt the pulse beating hard in my neck, hot and fast. "I walk away from my firm, move you into my house, and serve as your unpaid medical attendant." "It is what families do," Barbara said. She picked up her heavy designer bag, dismissing the conversation. "We cared for you, now you return the favor. Have the guest rooms cleared out by the 15th. They turned and walked out, leaving the frosted glass door ajar. The scent of Barbara's expensive floral perfume lingered in the cold air. They expected me to chase them down the hallway. They expected the teenage version of me, the girl desperate to prove her worth, ready to bend backward to earn a fraction of the pride they freely handed to Valerie. I sat alone in the quiet hum of the office. The desert sun felt hot against my shoulder through the glass. I did not cry. The panic they usually instilled in me was gone, replaced by a profound glacial clarity. I picked up my desk phone and dialed the private extension for the firm's probate division. "Elias," I said when the line connected. My voice did not shake. "It is Carenza. I need a favor from your department. I have 2 incoming clients who will require emergency conservatorship paperwork drafted. Make sure the clauses regarding involuntary placement are airtight. The Sun City Country Club is a world built on golf carts, manicured Bermuda grass, and silent judgments." The dining room smelled of imported prime rib and expensive gin. I stood at the edge of the mahogany entrance, watching my parents hold court at a corner table. Arizona possesses a very specific culture surrounding elder care. In these sprawling, sun-baked retirement utopias, children are expected to surrender their autonomy the moment their parents exhibit a single gray hair. It is a badge of honor for the retirees to boast about how much their offspring sacrifice for them. My mother was currently weaponizing this exact cultural expectation. I approached the table just in time to hear Barbara speaking to a woman in a pastel tennis skirt. The woman was leaning in, clutching a martini glass. "I just do not understand this generation," Barbara sighed, her voice carrying over the gentle clatter of silverware. "Thomas and I provided everything. Now that we need a little help transitioning into our golden years, Carenza is pushing back. She cares more about her spreadsheets than her own blood. It is borderline elder abuse leaving us to fend for ourselves." The woman in the tennis skirt placed a hand over her heart, feigning deep sympathy. "Oh, Barbara, that is tragic. You know, my son sold his dental practice in Seattle just to move down here and manage my daily medications. It is simple duty." I stepped forward, pulling out my leather-upholstered chair. "Good evening, Mother." "Hello, Mrs. Gable." Mrs. Gable flinched slightly, her eyes darting away as she offered a tight, uncomfortable smile before scurrying back to the bar. Barbara did not miss a beat. She adjusted her silk scarf and picked up her menu, acting as though she had not just attempted to destroy my social standing in a room full of local millionaires. This was the strategy, the social ambush. If they could not guilt me into submission privately, they would use the oppressive weight of the community to force my hand. They wanted me ostracized, painted as the ungrateful daughter, until I folded. My father, Thomas, signaled the waiter without looking up. "Bring us a bottle of the Caymus Cabernet," he ordered, "and a double pour of the Macallan 18 for me." I looked at the drink prices on the leather-bound menu. The scotch alone was $60. The wine was $300. For a couple claiming they could no longer manage their estate, they certainly retained an appetite for top-tier luxury. "Where is Marcus?" I asked, placing my napkin on my lap. My brother Marcus was the middle child. He escaped the intense familial pressure by adopting a stance of perpetual neutrality. He rarely spoke up, preferring to blend into the wallpaper during these dinners. Parking the car, Thomas grunted. Nia is with him. Right on cue, Marcus arrived, pulling out a chair. Behind him stood his wife, Nia. Nia was a senior financial auditor for a logistics firm downtown. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer and an expression that suggested she was constantly calculating the hidden costs of every interaction. She possessed a razor-sharp intellect and a profound intolerance for manipulation. Over the years, Nia had become my only genuine ally in this family. The dinner proceeded like a carefully scripted play. The first act consisted of Thomas and Barbara listing their sudden, mysterious physical ailments: a twinge in the lower lumbar region, a persistent ache in the wrists. They described these minor discomforts with the gravity of terminal diagnoses. The second act was dedicated to the worship of my older sister. "Valerie called us this morning," Barbara announced, taking a sip of the expensive red wine. "She just secured a major settlement for a tech firm in Silicon Valley. The partners are taking her to a Michelin-starred restaurant tonight to celebrate. She is a powerhouse," Thomas agreed, cutting into his steak. "We could never ask her to step away from a trajectory like that. The legal world needs her mind. It would be a crime to tie her down with our domestic issues." I chewed a piece of asparagus, tasting nothing but bitter salt. The subtext was blindingly bright. Valerie's time was a precious commodity. My time was worthless. I was the designated mule expected to carry the burden so the thoroughbred could run. "Excuse me," I said, placing my fork down. "I need to visit the powder room." I stood and walked away from the suffocating dynamic. The country club restrooms were opulent, lined with floor-to-ceiling marble and gold fixtures. I ran the cold water over my wrists, staring at my reflection in the gilded mirror. I needed to compose myself. I needed to maintain the icy professionalism I used during hostile corporate negotiations. The heavy oak door swung open and clicked shut. Nia stepped into the quiet room. She checked under the stalls to ensure we were alone, then walked over to the sink beside me. She did not bother turning on the tap. "They are lying," Nia said. Her voice was low, clipped, and entirely devoid of hesitation. I grabbed a thick paper towel, drying my hands. "About the back pain." "About everything," she replied. She opened her leather clutch and retrieved a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the marble counter toward me. "I am an auditor, Carenza. My entire career is based on finding numbers that do not match the narrative. Your father asked Marcus for help setting up a new routing number for his pension last week. Marcus, being Marcus, just handed the laptop to me to figure out. I saw the screen. I saw the recent tax filings. I unfolded the paper. It was a printed spreadsheet of raw data. My eyes scanned the columns automatically, my brain shifting into asset planner mode. The numbers did not make sense. "There is a staggering gap in these ledgers," I said, tracing a line of debt. "The equity on the Sun City house is gone." Nia nodded, leaning against the vanity. "They took out a second mortgage 3 years ago, then a home equity line of credit. They have maxed out 6 different premium credit cards. That Prada bag your mother brought to your office was purchased on a revolving retail account with a 24% interest rate." I stared at the paper, the harsh fluorescent light illuminating the undeniable truth. They were not physically failing. They were financially drowning. "They are insolvent," I whispered. The realization felt like a physical blow to the ribs. "Worse," Nia corrected gently. "They are facing foreclosure. The bank is going to take the Sun City property by the end of the year. They are not selling the house to downsize. Carenza, they are being forced out." The puzzle pieces snapped together with terrifying clarity. The sudden urgency, the demand to move into my guest suite, the insistence that I quit my job. They did not need a physical caregiver. They needed a host. They intended to move into my home, commandeer my savings, and use my pristine credit to fund their continued illusion of wealth. "If I quit my job, I lose my income," I reasoned aloud. "How does that help them?" "Because if you quit, you become dependent on the remaining equity of your own home," Nia explained. "They will convince you to pull money out of your Chandler property to support the family. They view your assets as their emergency fund. You are expendable capital." A profound, chilling silence settled over me. All my life, I thought my parents simply favored Valerie. I thought they were just harsh critics. But this was an entirely different level of betrayal. They were willing to bankrupt me, to destroy the career I built from nothing, just to hide their own financial incompetence from their country club friends. They view my life as a checking account, I said, handing the paper back to Nia. Nia slipped the document back into her clutch. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back was no longer the desperate daughter seeking approval. She was a senior retirement asset planner. She was a woman who built fortresses out of ironclad contracts. I am going to give them exactly what they asked for, I said. My voice echoed slightly against the marble. I am going to take control of their care. Nia offered a slow, approving smile. Read the fine print, Carenza. I left the country club before dessert, citing an early morning conference call. I drove through the dark desert roads toward Chandler, the silhouette of the mountains standing like silent sentinels against the night sky. The betrayal stung, but the data provided a strange, comforting armor. Numbers did not lie. Numbers did not play favorites. When I arrived home, I did not turn on the television. I did not pour a glass of wine. I went straight to my home office and booted up my laptop. I bypassed my standard work email and logged directly into the specialized legal database used by Arizona estate planners. My parents wanted to weaponize the elder care system against me. They wanted to use societal pressure to force me into servitude. But they fundamentally misunderstood the arena they were stepping into. The Arizona statutes governing adult guardianship were designed to protect vulnerable seniors from exploitation. But those same laws granted terrifying, unyielding power to the appointed conservator. If they wanted me to act as their caregiver, I would not do it as a subservient daughter. I would assume the role with total, undeniable legal authority. I opened a blank template for a Title 14 involuntary conservatorship petition. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The trap was primed. Now I just needed them to hand me the legal justification to spring it. And based on a text message that vibrated on my phone a moment later, my mother was already preparing to deliver exactly that. The text message arrived the next morning during my 9 o'clock client review. Barbara wanted to meet at a diner on the outskirts of town. It was a calculated downgrade from the opulent country club. She needed the setting to match her newly fabricated narrative of impending poverty. I arrived at noon. The Arizona heat was punishing, shimmering in waves above the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. Inside, the diner smelled of burnt grease, old coffee, and industrial floor cleaner. The vinyl seats of the booth stuck to the back of my legs. My mother sat across from me, wearing a beige trench coat, refusing to order anything more than hot water with a slice of lemon. "I do not have much of an appetite," she murmured, staring out the smudged window at the passing highway traffic. "The stress of your father's failing health is taking a toll on my digestion." I kept my expression neutral, folding my hands on the sticky Formica table. "What did you want to discuss, Mother?" She reached into her oversized tote and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She slid it across the table. The heavy paper scraped against the surface, a harsh sound in the quiet diner. "It is just some standard paperwork," she said, waving a hand in the air, "a medical power of attorney and a financial proxy. Given your father's failing back and my worsening arthritis, we need to be prepared for the worst. We need you to sign as our primary caregiver, just in case an emergency strikes before moving day." I opened the envelope and pulled out the stack of documents. The pages were crisp, the ink dark and heavy. Anyone else might have just skimmed the bold headings, felt a surge of familial duty, and signed on the dotted line. But I spent 40 hours a week dissecting estate planning traps. I read legal jargon the way a musician reads sheet music. My eyes scanned the text. It took me less than 30 seconds to find the poison pill. It was buried on page 4 under paragraph 7, subsection C. The language was intentionally dense, woven through layers of indemnification clauses and fiduciary release forms. It stipulated that as the designated primary caretaker, I would grant the wards full authorization to leverage my personal equity to secure their medical comfort. Translated into plain English, signing this document gave my parents the legal right to take out loans against my Chandler home and garnish my corporate salary to fund their lifestyle. It was not a proxy. It was a financial death warrant. They were trying to steal the roof over my head. "This is very thorough," I said, keeping my voice smooth and devoid of any accusation. "Did Valerie draft this for you?" Barbara clicked her tongue, clearly annoyed by the question. "You know your sister does not handle family law. Her time is far too valuable for this sort of clerical work. She referred us to a colleague. It is all standard boilerplate, Carenza. The lawyer assured us it merely grants you the permission to speak to our doctors and handle basic billing. Just sign it so we can have peace of mind." Basic billing. They intended to bleed me dry while smiling in my face. I slid the papers back into the envelope and placed it securely in my leather briefcase. "I will review it tonight and bring it back signed tomorrow." Barbara frowned, the corners of her mouth pulling down into a sharp, uncompromising angle. "Why wait? I have a pen right here. It is just a formality. You are overthinking this as usual." "I am a licensed financial planner," I replied, offering a polite, hollow smile. "If I sign a legal document without reading the fine print, I risk my credentials. You want me employed so I can provide the best care, right?" That silenced her. She could not argue against my employment without exposing her true motive. She offered a tight nod, gathering her things, to leave her hot water untouched. That evening, the air in my kitchen felt thick with anticipation. Nia arrived just after 8, carrying a bottle of dark Cabernet. She dropped her leather audit bag onto my granite island and kicked off her heels. I poured 2 generous glasses of the wine while she pulled the manila envelope from my briefcase. Nia read through the proxy, her eyes darting back and forth across the lines of text. She took a slow sip of her wine, never breaking her focus. After a few minutes, she dropped the document onto the counter and let out a dry, humorless laugh. "They really think you are foolish," Nia said. "This clause right here," she tapped the paper with a manicured fingernail, "gives them the authority to co-sign credit lines in your name. They are planning to drain your home equity to pay off their secret debt before the bank forecloses on their Sun City property." I leaned against the stainless steel refrigerator, crossing my arms. They want the keys to my kingdom. They want me bankrupt and tethered to them forever. Nia looked at me, her dark eyes flashing with sharp intelligence. "So we changed the locks. What is the counter move?" I walked over to the island and opened my laptop. I pulled up the Arizona state legal statutes. The beautiful thing about my profession is that I know exactly how the state views elder care. Arizona Title 14 governs adult conservatorship, I explained, turning the screen so Nia could see the legal text. What my parents handed me is a voluntary proxy. Under this agreement, they leave themselves in the driver's seat. They can revoke it at any time, usually right after they drain my accounts. Nia leaned closer, reading the dense paragraphs. "But what if it is involuntary?" "Exactly," I said. A cold satisfaction bloomed in my chest. If I file for an involuntary conservatorship, I flip the entire board. I petition the Superior Court to declare them mentally and physically incompetent. If the judge agrees, they become wards of the state, and I am appointed their absolute master. Nia's eyebrows rose. "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning they lose their civil rights?" I said, the gravity of the law settling over the room. "They lose the right to sign contracts. They lose the right to access their own bank accounts. They lose the right to drive to vote, and most importantly, to choose their own residence. I control every penny and every single decision regarding their lives." The tension in the room snapped, replaced by a wave of dark, exhilarating humor. We stood in the warm light of the kitchen laughing at the sheer audacity of the reversal. They built a trap designed to enslave me, and in doing so, they handed me the exact blueprint needed to strip them of their own autonomy. Nia raised her wine glass, tapping it against mine. The chime of the crystal rang clear and sharp. "To reading the fine print," she toasted. I drank the wine, savoring the rich, bitter finish. Then I sat down at my laptop and began to type. I did not revise their predatory documents. I discarded them entirely. Instead, I logged into my secure professional portal and drafted a petition for emergency guardianship under Title 14. I detailed their upcoming foreclosure as evidence of severe financial incompetence. I cited their own claims of failing physical health to establish physical vulnerability. I found a certified digital notary operating on a 24-hour secure server. Within 10 minutes, I had sworn an oath via video conference, verifying my identity and my intent. I electronically signed the petition. The documents were official, time-stamped, and ready to be filed with the county clerk first thing in the morning. The legal snare was set and waiting in the dark. All I needed now was proof that they were a true danger to themselves. I needed them to demonstrate sheer incompetence on the permanent medical record. As if sensing the shift in the universe, my phone vibrated against the granite counter. The screen lit up with a text message from Thomas. The message claimed he had forgotten to turn off the stove, insisting the kitchen had nearly caught fire. He demanded I leave my house immediately to come clean up his mess, claiming his memory was slipping. They were starting their campaign of fake emergencies, hoping to force me to quit my job out of fear. They thought they were building a case against my independence. They did not realize they were handing me the exact medical evidence required to lock them away forever. The vibration of my phone buzzed against the polished mahogany conference table, slicing through the quiet atmosphere of my quarterly review. I was in the middle of rebalancing a 7-figure portfolio for a retired cardiac surgeon. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID flashed my father's name. I silenced the device and continued explaining the tax implications of municipal bonds. 2 minutes later, the phone buzzed again, then a third time. I excused myself and stepped into the carpeted hallway overlooking the Phoenix skyline. When I answered, Thomas did not offer a greeting. He bypassed normal conversation and launched straight into a frantic, breathless performance. "The kitchen is filled with smoke," he gasped, coughing theatrically into the receiver. "I left the burner on Carenza. I forgot the kettle was boiling. The plastic handle melted. I do not know what is happening to my mind lately. You need to come here right now." "Call the fire department," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "No," he snapped, the panic dropping for a fraction of a second before he caught himself. "No sirens. Do not make a spectacle in front of the neighbors." "I just need my daughter. I cannot trust myself alone in this house anymore." I ended the call and dialed the local non-emergency dispatch, sending a fire crew to the Sun City address anyway. A formal incident report filed by a state official was worth its weight in gold. I arrived at their property an hour later. The smell of scorched plastic and burnt aluminum hung heavy in the stagnant air of the kitchen. A single ruined saucepan sat in the center of the pristine granite island. The fire department had already come and gone, leaving behind a lingering scent of ozone and a written citation on the counter. Thomas sat in his leather recliner, staring blankly at a muted television screen. He was playing the part of a bewildered, deteriorating old man. Barbara stood at the base of the carpeted staircase, clutching the oak banister with trembling hands. "My knees," she whimpered, looking up at the second floor as if it were a towering cliff. "The cartilage is just gone. I tried to walk up to fetch your father's blood pressure monitor, and I nearly collapsed. We are falling apart, Carenza. We are a danger to ourselves. You see it now, do you not?" I stood in the foyer observing them with clinical detachment. This theatrical display was not new. Growing up, their physical ailments always conveniently flared whenever I achieved something independent of their control. My high school graduation dinner was overshadowed by Barbara faking a sudden, mysterious bout of vertigo, forcing me to spend the evening fetching her ice packs instead of celebrating with my friends. My college send-off was derailed by Thomas claiming severe angina pains, keeping me tethered to the living room while other students moved into their dorms. They used illness as a leash. They expected me to shrink back into the terrified child desperate to soothe them. They believed this manufactured crisis would finally break my resolve and force me to resign from my firm. I did not argue. I did not point out the distinct lack of swelling in Barbara's joints or the crisp ironed crease in Thomas's trousers, which he supposedly put on while suffering a severe cognitive episode. I simply nodded, acting the part of the overwhelmed, dutiful daughter. "I will handle it," I promised, softly. "I will make sure you get the exact level of care you require." I walked out to my car and closed the heavy door, sealing myself inside the quiet cabin. The Arizona heat radiated through the windshield. I opened my briefcase and pulled out my encrypted professional tablet. As an elder care consultant, I possess direct access to the state-certified reporting portals. These databases were linked directly to the Maricopa County Health Department registries utilized by probate courts to establish baseline histories for vulnerable adults. I logged the stove incident. I attached a scanned copy of the fire department citation. I categorized the event under severe cognitive hazard. I then created a detailed entry regarding Barbara's sudden inability to navigate stairs, checking the boxes for high fall risk and severe mobility impairment. This was the beginning of the paper trail. Over the next 2 weeks, they accelerated their timeline. The phone calls became relentless, interrupting my most vital client meetings. They reported forgotten medications. They claimed Thomas had wandered down the street in his pajamas, unable to remember his own address. Barbara called weeping that she had turned on the shower and stood there, paralyzed, unable to remember how to adjust the temperature. They were weaving a masterpiece of fictional decline. They thought they were building an undeniable case to force me out of my career. They thought they were proving that I had no choice but to move them into my home and watch them around the clock. Instead, they were handing me the boulders I would use to crush their trap. I documented every single call. I logged every fabricated symptom. I built a bulletproof medical file filled with their own exaggerated claims. But a logbook was not enough to satisfy the Superior Court. I needed official, undisputed clinical validation. I called my mother on a Wednesday morning, feigning a tone of deep distress. I told her I was taking their decline very seriously. I informed her I had scheduled them for comprehensive evaluations at the Scottsdale Neurological Institute. It was the premier diagnostic clinic in the state, known for its stringent, unforgiving assessments of cognitive decay. I paid the exorbitant consultation fees out of pocket to ensure we received the most rigorous doctors on staff. Barbara hesitated for only a second before agreeing. She viewed the appointment as a victory. She assumed a doctor's visit would simply validate her narrative and apply more pressure on me. The waiting room of the institute was a symphony of sterile white surfaces and hushed voices. Dr. Aris, a neurologist with a reputation for merciless precision, called us back into his examination room. My parents performed brilliantly. They were eager to secure the diagnosis they thought would enslave me. When Dr. Aris asked Thomas to count backward from 100 by sevens, Thomas purposefully stumbled at 86, offering a vacant, helpless stare. When asked about current events, Thomas mixed up decades, acting deeply disoriented. Barbara sat beside him, weeping delicate tears into a tissue, weaving a tragic tale of her husband getting lost in their own hallway. She then pivoted to her own fabricated woes, insisting her joints were so degraded she required assistance merely to stand up from the examination table. They hammed it up, playing the parts of helpless, declining seniors to garner the doctor's sympathy. They cast frequent, tragic glances in my direction, ensuring Dr. Aris understood I was the only thing standing between them and total ruin. I sat quietly in the corner of the room, wearing a polite, concerned smile. Dr. Aris took meticulous notes. He did not suspect deception, because patients rarely lie to prove they are losing their minds. People typically fight to keep their autonomy. The idea that two adults would fake severe dementia simply to force their daughter into unpaid servitude was beyond the realm of standard medical diagnosis. After an hour of physical and cognitive tests, Dr. Aris asked my parents to wait in the hall. He closed the heavy door and turned to me, his expression grim and professional. "Ms. James," he said, keeping his voice low, "the decline is significant. Given the fire hazard incident you described and the severe disorientation I witnessed today, I cannot, in good conscience, recommend they remain unsupervised. They lack the capacity to manage their own affairs or ensure their own safety." He pulled a stack of formal state documents from his clipboard. These were the forms required by the probate court, the official medical affidavits certifying incapacity. "I will sign these establishing their cognitive and physical incompetence," he continued. "You will need to take immediate steps to secure their environment." I took the paperwork, feeling the smooth weight of the paper in my hands. The ink from his signature was still wet. "Thank you, doctor," I said, my voice thick with manufactured gratitude. "I have already initiated the legal process to take full control of their care. I will make sure they are placed exactly where they belong." I walked out of the clinic with my parents trailing behind me, leaning heavily on each other for their performance. They thought they had won. They thought they had just secured their luxury retirement in my Chandler home. They did not realize the chilling truth. Thomas and Barbara had just enthusiastically participated in their own legal unmaking. By staging a flawless performance of mental decay, they had handed me legally binding, undisputed medical records proving their own incompetence. The trap was now locked, and they were the ones who turned the key. But dealing with the state was only half the battle. Just as I filed the medical affidavits with the court clerk, my phone lit up with an email notification from my older sister. Valerie was flying into Phoenix. The golden child was coming to deliver her terms, and she intended to dictate exactly how I would spend the rest of my life. The lunch reservation was set for 1 o'clock at a French bistro in the Biltmore district. It was the sort of establishment where the menus lacked dollar signs and the waiters moved like shadows. I arrived 15 minutes early, securing a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. I needed to see my sister before she saw me. Valerie walked through the brass-trimmed doors exactly 7 minutes late. She wore a tailored white crepe suit that defied the dusty Arizona environment. Her presence demanded space. She did not look for a hostess. She simply scanned the dining room, found my booth, and navigated through the tables with the effortless entitlement of someone who has never been told no. As she slid into the leather curved seat opposite me, the scent of bergamot and expensive dry shampoo settled over the table. We shared the same eye color, but the resemblance ended there. She possessed the polished, untouchable aura of a senior corporate litigator. I was the financial planner, the pragmatic worker bee expected to produce honey on demand. "It is too hot in this state," she announced, dropping her designer sunglasses next to her silverware. "How do you endure this baking heat year after year, Carenza? I swear the air here saps the energy right out of my bones." "You adapt," I said, handing her a leather-bound drink menu. A waiter appeared instantly, pouring iced mineral water into our crystal goblets. Valerie did not glance up at him. "I will have the Sancerre," she instructed, "the reserve tier." I knew the wine list. That single glass cost $50. I ordered a standard iced tea. Valerie waited until the waiter retreated before leaning forward, resting her manicured hands on the pristine white tablecloth. "Let us skip the pleasantries," she said. Her tone was surgical, precise, and entirely devoid of warmth. "Mother and father called me in a panic last night. They told me about the neurological evaluation. They told me about the kitchen fire. They are deteriorating," I replied, maintaining my carefully constructed mask of concern. "Their physical limits are shrinking, and their cognitive function is unpredictable. Dr. Aris made it clear they require constant supervision." Exactly, Valerie said, accepting the glass of pale wine from the returning waiter. She took a slow, appreciative sip. "Which brings us to the logistics of their living arrangement. Mother mentioned you are clearing out your guest suite. That is a temporary fix, Carenza. Your Chandler house has stairs leading up from the driveway. The guest bathroom lacks grab bars. If you are going to take them in, you need to do it correctly." I took a sip of my iced tea, letting the cold liquid soothe my dry throat. "What do you suggest?" "You need to build a ground floor addition," she declared. "A fully accessible accessory dwelling unit attached to the main structure. 0-step entry, walk-in showers, dedicated climate control." I ran the estimates with a contractor I know in Phoenix. "You are looking at roughly $200,000 to do it right." I set my glass down. The ice clinked softly. $200,000. "You can liquidate your primary retirement accounts," she said, waving a hand dismissively, as if suggesting I merely empty my wallet. "You have been maxing out your contributions since you were 22. Pull the funds, pay the penalty, and hire the crews. They need a safe environment, Carenza. You cannot put a price on family." I stared at her. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of the demand sat between us heavy and suffocating. She was ordering me to gut my own financial future to build a luxury suite for the parents who were actively trying to ruin me. "And what is your financial contribution to this project?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. Valerie offered a patronizing smile. She took another sip of the $50 wine. "You know my capital is tied up in the firm right now. My assets are shielded in irrevocable trusts. As a partner, I have to maintain a certain liquidity ratio for my equity buy-in. I cannot simply drain my accounts. Besides, you have always been the domestic one. You live here. It only makes sense that you shoulder the infrastructure costs." The domestic one. The words were a tiny, sharp pebble digging into my skin. Growing up, our parents funded her undergraduate degree, her LSAT prep courses, and her entire law school tuition. They drained their own early retirement funds to ensure Valerie never had to take out a single student loan. Meanwhile, I worked the closing shift at a local diner, smelling of fry grease and bleach, just to afford community college textbooks. They viewed Valerie as an investment. They viewed me as a sponge, waiting to be squeezed dry whenever the family required a sacrifice. "You make $140,000 a year," Valerie continued, leaning back and inspecting her fingernails. "You just need to budget better. Skip the vacations. Cut back on the luxury expenses. You will recover the retirement funds eventually. You are young." She gave me a lecture on fiscal responsibility while drinking wine that cost more than a tank of gas. I bit the inside of my cheek, using the brief flash of physical pain to anchor my temper. If I fought back now, she would raise her defenses. She was a litigator. She lived for arguments. I could not defeat her in a screaming match. I had to defeat her on paper. I let my shoulders slump. I lowered my gaze to the tablecloth, adopting the posture of the defeated younger sister. "You are right," I whispered, forcing a tremor into my voice. "I have the space. I have the proximity. It falls on me." Valerie sighed, a sound of profound relief, masked as familial sympathy. "Good. I am glad we did not have to argue about this. It is the only logical path forward." "There is just one logistical hurdle," I said, tracing the rim of my glass. "If I am liquidating my accounts and managing their medical care, I cannot have outside interference. If a contractor requires a signature or a doctor demands authorization, I need to be the sole decision maker. If you are retaining medical or financial proxy rights, the banks and the hospitals will constantly delay the paperwork to seek your approval." Valerie frowned, her legal mind analyzing the statement. She wanted none of the liability. She wanted zero risk of a nursing home or a hospital tracing a bill back to her pristine, shielded accounts. "I do not have the bandwidth to field calls from Phoenix doctors," she agreed quickly. "I need total separation from the day-to-day management." "Then I need it in writing," I said, meeting her eyes. "Just a simple email for my files. State that you formally relinquish all financial, legal, and caregiving responsibilities regarding mother and father. State that I am the sole authority. It will protect your trusts from any unexpected medical debt collections, and it will allow me to sign the construction permits without needing your notarized consent." Valerie reached into her tailored blazer and pulled out her phone. The prospect of legally severing herself from our parents' impending financial ruin was too sweet to resist. She did not hesitate. Her thumbs flew across the screen, tapping out the precise legal language required to abandon her family. "Done," she said, setting the phone face down on the table. "You should have it in your inbox." I outlined that I waive all rights to dictate care, and I assume zero financial liability for their housing or medical expenses. You are the captain of the ship now, Carenza. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. The email had arrived. Underneath the table, hidden by the draped white linen, I slid my hand into my pocket. I unlocked my phone by touch, forwarded Valerie's email directly to Nia, and typed a quick message. "The golden child just signed away her rights. The waiver is secure." I smiled at my sister, a soft, accommodating smile that masked the lethal trap closing around her. "Thank you, Valerie. That makes things much easier for me." We finished our lunch in relative peace. Valerie ordered a $20 truffle salad and spoke at length about her upcoming vacation to the Amalfi Coast. She offered unsolicited advice on how I should manage the contractors for the home addition. I listened quietly, nodding at all the right intervals. She paid for her wine and salad with a heavy platinum corporate card, leaving a stingy 10% tip for the waiter. As we stood on the baking pavement outside the bistro waiting for the valet to bring her rental car, my phone pinged with a high-priority notification. It was not a text message. It was a secure alert from the Maricopa County Digital Court Portal. I glanced at the screen, shielding it from the harsh sunlight. The Superior Court had reviewed my emergency petition. Dr. Aris's medical affidavits regarding my parents' severe cognitive decline had been accepted into evidence without question. The message contained a formal docket number and a date. The emergency guardianship hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 9 in the morning. My sister gave me a brief, rigid hug, her cheek barely brushing mine. "Good luck with the renovations, Carenza," she said, slipping on her sunglasses. "Do not mess this up. They are relying on you." I watched her sleek black rental car merge onto the busy avenue, disappearing into the midday traffic. I stood alone on the hot sidewalk, the digital court summons glowing quietly in my hand. My sister thought she had just escaped the burden of our parents. My parents thought they had just secured a free luxury retirement. They were all celebrating their absolute victory. They had no idea they had just handed me the legal authority to lock them inside a nightmare of their own making. The glow of the dual monitors cast a cold blue light across the empty office. It was Friday night. The rest of the wealth management firm had emptied out hours ago, leaving only the hum of the central air conditioning and the rhythmic tapping of my keyboard. With the emergency guardianship hearing scheduled for Tuesday, I needed a flawless financial inventory. I knew my parents' Social Security numbers by heart. I utilized a secure skip tracing software available only to senior asset planners. I bypassed the standard credit bureaus and dug directly into the title records and wire transfer histories associated with the Sun City property. The ledger loaded on my screen row by row. It was a digital autopsy of their finances. Nia was right about the second mortgage and the maxed out lines of credit. But seeing the raw data revealed a truth far more sinister than simple fiscal incompetence. The numbers told a story of intentional, targeted wealth transfer. The dates of the loans aligned perfectly with major milestones in another person's life. I tracked a $75,000 cash withdrawal taken against their home equity 5 years ago. I cross-referenced the date. It was the exact week Valerie began her prestigious law program. Another wire transfer for $50,000 cleared 2 years later, coinciding precisely with Valerie purchasing her luxury condo in San Francisco. A recurring monthly draft of $1,200 matched the exact lease payment of a Mercedes-Benz registered in my sister's name. My parents did not go bankrupt because they were bad with money. They went bankrupt funding a golden idol. I sat back in my ergonomic chair. The leather creaked in the silence. A cold, hollow sensation expanded in my chest, extinguishing the very last flicker of hope I held that they ever possessed a genuine parental love for me. I closed my eyes and a memory surfaced, unbidden. I was 20 years old, sitting on the floor of a cramped studio apartment, rubbing my aching feet. I was working 3 separate jobs just to keep my enrollment at the state university. I took the graveyard shift at an all-night diner, smelling constantly of stale coffee and fryer grease. I spent my mornings scrubbing dorm bathrooms, inhaling toxic bleach fumes to earn a housing stipend. I tutored struggling freshmen in statistics during the afternoons. I existed in a state of permanent exhaustion. I remembered calling my mother that semester, begging for a small loan of $400 to cover a required textbook. She told me, "Character is built through struggle," and hung up the phone. While I scrubbed toilets and forfeited sleep, my parents were secretly mortgaging their future to ensure Valerie never experienced a single moment of financial discomfort. They handed her hundreds of thousands of dollars wrapped in unconditional adoration. Now that the well had run dry, they expected me to sacrifice my hard-earned career to clean up the wreckage. The glass door of my office clicked open, breaking the quiet atmosphere. Nia stepped inside carrying a pair of insulated paper cups. I figured you would still be here, she said, setting a dark roast coffee on my desk. What did you find? I turned the monitor so she could see the spreadsheet. I traced the money, pointing at the outgoing wires. Nia leaned over my shoulder, her eyes scanning the columns. Her breath hitched. She traced the routing numbers, noticing the destination accounts. This is not just mismanagement, Nia whispered, her tone laced with raw disgust. This is premeditated exploitation. They drained their entire net worth to subsidize Valerie, and now they want to use you as their final desperate safety net. They are treating my life like a backup generator, I replied, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. But there is an immediate logistical problem. Look at the default notices on the Sun City property. Nia scrolled down the page. The primary lender filed a notice of default last month. The foreclosure auction is scheduled in 10 days. If the bank seizes the house before the conservatorship is legally finalized, the timeline shatters. My parents will be left homeless on the street. They will arrive on my doorstep in a panic, demanding entry, and I will lose the element of surprise. I needed them to believe they were in control right up until the moment the magnetic doors of the facility locked behind them. I have to secure the debt, I stated, setting the cup down. I cannot let the bank take the house yet. Maya raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting paying their mortgage, Kerenza? You cannot hand them a single dime. I am not giving them anything, I said, a tight smile forming on my lips. I am going to buy the paper. As an asset planner, I understood the intricate mechanics of distressed debt. Banks despised holding defaulted mortgages on their books. They preferred to sell non-performing loans to third-party investors for a fraction of the value just to clear the liability. I spent the next 3 hours drafting a proposal. I utilized a shell corporation I established years ago for private investments, a blind trust registered in Delaware. The structure guaranteed utter anonymity. Through the trust, I authorized my broker to contact the primary lender holding the Sun City mortgage. I offered to purchase the distressed debt in a full cash settlement. I was not paying off their loan. I was buying the right to collect it. The tension in the room grew into a slow, suffocating squeeze. If my parents discovered I was the one pulling the strings, the illusion would collapse. They currently believed they were weeks away from moving into my pristine Chandler home, ruling my life and treating me like a servant. They were packing their belongings right now, boasting to their neighbors about their obedient daughter. By Monday morning, the bank responded. They were thrilled to unload the toxic asset. I sat in my office with the final contract glowing on my screen. The document required a digital signature to authorize the wire transfer from my private accounts. This was the moment of total financial dominance. By signing this document, I was no longer just the scapegoat daughter. I was their sole creditor. I effectively owned the roof over their heads. I could evict them tomorrow, if I chose. I read the terms one last time. My parents had spent their entire lives treating my sister like royalty and treating me like a peasant. They thought they had engineered the perfect scheme to enslave me. They assumed I would fold under the cultural pressure of elder care duty. I typed my name into the authorization box and hit submit. The confirmation flashed bright green. The funds transferred instantly from my trust. I leaned back, letting out a long, slow exhale. The Sun City property now belonged to me in everything but name. My parents were packing boxes in a house I controlled, anticipating a luxurious retirement that did not exist. The snare was fully constructed, fueled by their own greed and funded by my success. The court date for the guardianship hearing was tomorrow. They had no idea a judge was about to declare them incompetent based on their own fabricated medical records. They had no idea their golden child had legally abandoned them to save her own shielded assets. And they certainly did not know their forgotten daughter had just purchased their debt, becoming their landlord and their warden, all in one swift motion. The Arizona Superior Court operates with a chilling, sterile efficiency. Located in the heart of downtown Phoenix, the building is a towering monolith of limestone and tinted glass designed to process the end of human autonomy without a single shred of emotion. I did not need to walk through its metal detectors or sit in its rigid wooden pews to initiate the undoing of my parents. I remained sealed inside the quiet sanctuary of my corporate office, sipping warm green tea while accessing the restricted electronic filing portal utilized by certified estate planners. The documents glowing on my dual monitors were remarkably plain. The Arizona Title 14 statutes do not employ dramatic language. They consist of standard checkboxes, uniform margins, and dense paragraphs outlining fiduciary responsibility. Yet, beneath the dry legal terminology lay a profound, terrifying power. These specific pages functioned as a legal guillotine. I dragged and dropped the digital file containing the fire department incident report into the evidence folder. I uploaded the comprehensive medical affidavit signed by the prestigious neurologist Dr. Aris. The specialist had checked the precise boxes indicating extreme physical vulnerability and severe cognitive disorientation. My parents had delivered an award-winning fictional performance at that clinic, hoping to force my hand. I used their own theatrical lies as the cornerstone of my petition. Because Arizona serves as the premier retirement destination of the country, the probate courts are perpetually flooded with guardianship requests. To bypass the lengthy standard docket and secure an emergency ex parte order, an order granted without the wards even being present or notified, the danger must be imminent and undeniable. Thomas and Barbara had handed me undeniable peril on a silver platter. I submitted the petition and waited. The first hurdle arrived the following afternoon in the form of an unscheduled phone call. The caller ID displayed a generic Maricopa County government prefix. I cleared my throat, adjusted my posture in my ergonomic chair, and answered. "Ms. James," a woman asked, her voice carrying the unmistakable fatigue of a seasoned civil servant. "This is Investigator Jenkins with the Probate Division. I am reviewing the emergency conservatorship petition you filed regarding Thomas and Barbara James." "Good afternoon, Ms. Jenkins," I replied, injecting my tone with the perfect blend of professional courtesy and underlying daughterly anxiety. "Thank you for looking into this so quickly. These are extreme measures," Ms. James, the investigator, noted. The rustle of papers echoed through the receiver. "You are asking the court to strip your parents of their fundamental civil liberties without a preliminary hearing. The county records show no prior history of dementia or wandering. This seems highly sudden." I closed my eyes, recalling the decades of psychological conditioning my parents had inflicted upon me. When I was a teenager, Barbara used to meticulously control every hour of my schedule. She would routinely ground me for minor infractions, locking me inside my bedroom to study on weekend nights, while Valerie was permitted to attend lavish parties and travel with friends. Barbara justified the isolation by claiming she was protecting my future. I channeled that exact suffocating memory, turning the tables. "That is precisely why this is an emergency, Ms. Jenkins," I said, letting a subtle tremor enter my voice. "The decline has been precipitous and entirely unpredictable. My father nearly burned their house down 3 weeks ago. My mother collapsed, attempting to climb a standard staircase. They are currently facing an impending foreclosure on their Sun City property because they forgot to pay their mortgage for nearly a year. They are terrified, confused, and highly vulnerable." I paused, allowing the silence to hang in the air, ensuring she felt the weight of the crisis. "If they are left unsupervised for another month," I continued, "I fear they will end up homeless or fatally injured. I have the resources to secure them in a top-tier facility immediately, but I lack the legal authority to force them to go. They require protection from their own deteriorating minds." Investigator Jenkins sighed, a sound of weary resignation. She encountered greedy, manipulative children every day of the week. She was trained to spot financial predators seeking to steal their parents' wealth. But my file told the exact opposite story. I was a high-earning professional stepping in to rescue destitute, heavily indebted seniors. The meticulous organization of the evidence, the fire department citation, the neurologist affidavit, and the impending foreclosure notices painted an airtight narrative of a devoted daughter trying to prevent a tragedy. "I will submit my recommendation to the judge this afternoon," she said, her tone softening significantly. "You have provided a very thorough record, Ms. James. Your parents are fortunate to have an advocate with your level of expertise." "Thank you," I whispered, holding back a cold smile. "I just want them to be safe." While I navigated the rigorous corridors of the judicial system, Thomas and Barbara remained 40 miles northwest in their manicured cul-de-sac, entirely oblivious to the invisible cage descending upon them. They were busy packing. Through a mutual family acquaintance who still lived in their neighborhood, I learned the exact details of their moving preparations. They had purchased a bulk order of heavy-duty cardboard boxes and expensive bubble wrap. They were treating the impending transition not as a desperate retreat from bankruptcy, but as a grand, victorious relocation. Barbara spent her afternoons standing on the sun-baked concrete of her driveway, holding court with her neighbors. She sipped iced tea and bragged loudly across the stucco fences. "Carenza is finally stepping up," she announced to Mrs. Gable, wrapping a piece of fine crystal in tissue paper. "We are moving into her Chandler estate next week. It is a massive property. She will be handling all the cooking and managing our daily schedules. It is about time she prioritized family over those spreadsheets of hers." Thomas chimed in, taping a box shut with forceful rips of adhesive. "We raised her right. She understands her duty. We are looking forward to a very relaxing transition." Their sheer, arrogant ignorance was staggering. They envisioned a life of total leisure, anticipating a future where they lounged in my home, ruling over my daily routine, and treating me as their personal domestic servant. They believed they had outsmarted the system. They thought their fabricated illnesses and their financial secrecy had secured them a permanent free ride. They had no idea that I now owned the debt on the very house they were packing. They had no idea that Valerie had signed a legal waiver abandoning them forever. And they had no idea that a judge was currently reviewing a stack of papers that would render their opinions entirely meaningless. Tuesday morning arrived with a quiet, unassuming dawn. I sat at my desk watching the digital clock on my monitor tick toward 9 o'clock. The Superior Court handled emergency ex parte hearings in closed chambers. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown. There were no gavels striking wooden blocks. The process was silent, administrative, and definitive. At 9:14, my secure email portal chimed. I opened the encrypted message from the county clerk. Attached was a single PDF file. I clicked the icon and the document expanded across my screen. It was the order of appointment of permanent guardian and conservator. At the bottom of the final page, sitting stark and undeniable against the white digital paper, was the red electronic stamp of the Superior Court judge. The signature slashed across the designated line, granting the petition in its entirety. I slowly scrolled through the decrees, reading the legal language that now defined my parents' existence. Thomas and Barbara James were officially classified as incapacitated adults. They were legally stripped of the right to enter into contracts. They could not open or close bank accounts. They could not purchase property. They could not refuse medical treatment. They could not obtain a driver's license. Most crucially, they had lost the right to determine their own domicile. I exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was a child. The heavy, suffocating weight of their expectations, the constant belittling, the endless financial demands, all of it evaporated in the glow of the monitor. I reached out and traced the red digital stamp with my index finger. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was no longer the disappointment. I was their legal master. I held the sole, unquestionable authority to dictate where they would sleep, what they would eat, and exactly how the rest of their lives would unfold. The trap was locked. Now all I had to do was choose the perfect prison. The intercom on my desk emitted a sharp, synthetic buzz, shattering the quiet focus of my morning. I was reviewing the tax implications of a municipal bond ladder for a new client. I pressed the flashing silver button on the console. My department head, Gregory Holden, requested my presence in his office immediately. His voice lacked its usual warm cadence. It sounded strained and rigidly formal. A sudden summons from the managing director was never a casual event. Gregory Holden had built this wealth management firm from the ground up over 3 decades. He was a veteran of the Arizona elder care industry. He spent his entire career navigating the ugly, turbulent intersections of immense wealth, deteriorating minds, and greedy relatives. He did not rattle easily. I locked my workstation, smoothed the lapels of my tailored blazer, and walked down the carpeted hallway. The firm occupied the top floor of a glass tower offering a sweeping view of Camelback Mountain. The harsh morning sun baked the red rocks in the distance. I stepped into his corner office. Gregory sat behind a sprawling mahogany desk, his hands clasped tightly together over a legal pad. He gestured to the leather chair opposite him. I sat down, crossing my ankles and resting my hands in my lap, maintaining a posture of calm professionalism. "Kerensa," he began, his brow furrowing, deep into a heavy frown. "I just received a very disturbing phone call on my direct private line. It was your mother." The air in the room seemed to stall. A cold spike of adrenaline hit my bloodstream, but I kept my face entirely impassive. I waited for him to continue. "She was hysterical," Gregory said, leaning forward. "She claimed you were neglecting her and your father during a severe medical crisis. She told me they are practically dying in their Sun City home, and you have refused to provide basic care or financial assistance. She accused you of emotional abuse. She stated that a woman with such a profound lack of moral character has no business managing the retirement assets of vulnerable seniors. She demanded I terminate your employment immediately." The strategy was breathtaking in its sheer spite. Frustrated that I had not yet submitted my resignation, Barbara decided to force my hand by destroying my reputation. She intended to torch my $140,000 career, ensuring I would have nowhere else to go. If I lost my job, I would lose my independence. I would be forced to retreat into my Chandler home with 0 income, relying solely on the remaining equity of my house, the exact equity they planned to drain. I felt a ghost of a memory surface. I was 17 years old, wearing a flour-dusted apron at a local bakery. I had spent 6 months saving every minimum wage paycheck to buy a used car and secure my freedom. The day before I planned to purchase the vehicle, Barbara called the bakery manager. She fabricated a story claiming she caught me stealing money from her purse and warned the manager I was a liability. The bakery fired me on the spot. My savings went to household rent my parents suddenly demanded. They clipped my wings the moment they saw me preparing to fly. The tactic was identical. The scale was just larger. "Are you going to fire me, Gregory?" I asked, my tone mild and unaffected. Gregory studied me, his sharp eyes searching my face for panic or guilt. He found neither. "I know the elder care sector, Kerensa," he said softly. "I know how cognitive decline manifests. I also know how toxic relatives behave when they feel control slipping away. I am giving you the floor. Tell me, what is happening?" I reached into my briefcase and pulled out my encrypted professional tablet. I did not need to defend my character with frantic explanations or defensive tears. I operated in a world of documentation. I woke the screen up, navigating directly to the Maricopa County Judicial Portal. I opened the PDF file I received the previous day. I placed the tablet flat on the mahogany desk and slid it across the polished wood. Gregory looked down at the screen. He read the header. His eyes widened slightly as he processed the judicial seal. He scrolled through the document, reading the stark legal decrees of the Title 14 Permanent Guardianship Order. He saw the medical affidavits signed by the premier neurologist in Scottsdale. He saw the exact legal parameters stripping Thomas and Barbara of their autonomy. "My parents are facing an impending foreclosure they actively concealed," I explained, my voice steady and clinical. "They staged a series of medical emergencies to force me to quit this firm and serve as their full-time medical attendant. They assumed I would fold under the cultural expectation of filial duty. Instead, I utilized their own fabricated medical records to petition the Superior Court. A judge declared them incompetent yesterday morning. I am now their legal conservator. Gregory sat back in his chair, letting out a long breath. The tension in his shoulders dissolved instantly. He looked at the court order and then looked at me, a profound respect dawning in his eyes. "They thought they were building a case against you," he murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. "They handed you the keys to their own prison. They are currently packing their belongings in Sun City under the delusion that they are moving into my guest suite this Friday," I continued. "My mother called you today because she is growing impatient. She wanted to sever my final tether to independence before moving day. You handled this with surgical precision, Kerensa." Gregory handed the tablet back to me. "Most people would crumble under this kind of psychological warfare. You utilized the state statutes exactly as they were designed." I placed the tablet back into my briefcase. "Does Human Resources require a formal incident report regarding her phone call?" "No," Gregory said, waving a hand dismissively. "I will flag her number in the telecom system and block any future incoming calls from that prefix. But we do need to discuss your schedule. Moving 2 hostile wards of the state into a secure environment is a logistical nightmare." I nodded, prepared to ask for a few unpaid personal days. "I am placing you on paid administrative leave starting this afternoon," Gregory announced. "Take 2 weeks. The firm will cover your active portfolios. You need the time to execute this transition without worrying about client emails or bond yields. Handle your business, Kerensa." I walked out of the corner office a few minutes later, a cold smile touching the corners of my mouth. Barbara tried to ruin my life and plunge me into poverty. Instead, her malice provided me with a 2-week paid vacation to finalize her permanent institutionalization. The sabotage attempt backfired spectacularly. Any lingering microscopic shred of guilt I might have harbored regarding their fate vanished into the dry air. They had proven they would gladly watch me burn if it kept them warm. I walked to my car in the parking garage, the concrete echoing with my footsteps. I dialed Nia from the quiet sanctuary of the driver's seat. She picked up on the second ring. "Tell me the firm did not fire you," Nia said, her voice tight with concern. "They gave me 2 weeks of paid leave," I replied, starting the engine. The air conditioning roared to life, blasting cold air across my face. Mother called the managing director and tried to claim elder abuse. I showed him the permanent guardianship order. Nia let out a sharp, bright laugh that filled the car. "They really do not know when to quit, do they? They are digging the hole deeper with every single move." "We are in the final stretch," I said, shifting the car into gear. "Friday is moving day. I just need to finalize the destination." "Stay focused," Nia warned, her tone shifting back to her analytical baseline. "Do not drop the facade. Let them believe they have won." I ended the call and drove out of the parking garage, merging onto the sun-baked highway. I did not drive toward my home in Chandler. I headed toward the deep desert. 30 miles outside the city limits, the manicured golf courses and luxury shopping centers gave way to unforgiving, arid landscapes. Cacti stood like sentinels among the red dirt and rocky outcrops. Here, the heat was a physical barrier, isolating anything built within it. I arrived at the iron gates of Desert Pines. It was a highly specialized, secure facility designed for high-risk memory care patients and wards of the state. It catered to families who needed absolute containment. I parked and walked into the sterile, opulent lobby. The director, a woman with a calm, clinical demeanor, reviewed my judicial paperwork. She verified the court seals and the medical affidavits. Everything was in perfect order. I authorized a substantial deposit, transferring the funds directly from the blind trust I used to purchase their debt. The transaction cleared instantly, securing their placement for the next 12 months. I signed the admission forms, establishing myself as the sole point of contact. I requested the highest level of security protocols, forbidding any unapproved phone calls or visitors. The director stamped the file, confirming the arrangement. The booking was sealed. Their new reality was bought and paid for, waiting quietly in the desert heat. The Arizona judicial system operates on rigid procedural mandates. When a judge grants a permanent guardianship order, the court clerk automatically dispatches a certified notice to all immediate next of kin. The state does not care about family dynamics or estrangement. The law requires notification. I knew the exact delivery window for the certified mail. I monitored the tracking number through the county portal. I anticipated the explosion. It happened on a Thursday morning. My phone vibrated across the kitchen counter, sliding against the polished granite. The caller ID displayed my older sister's name. Valerie never called me before noon unless she required a favor. I let the device ring 3 times. I needed her anxiety to peak. I cleared my throat, practicing a ragged intake of breath. I answered the call. Valerie did not offer a greeting. She bypassed standard etiquette and launched into a frantic tirade. "I just received a certified letter from Maricopa County," she shouted, her voice shrill and entirely unpolished. "What did you do, Carenza? Why is the state sending me official documents about permanent guardianship and asset review?" I forced a sob into my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, projecting the sound of a terrified, overwhelmed victim. "I do not know, Valerie," I stammered my words, stumbling over each other. The hospital social workers got involved after the fire incident. They audited Mother and Father's finances. They discovered the crushing debt. The state is stepping in. They are talking about liquidating everything to cover the medical costs of a mandated care facility. Valerie paused. The silence on the line was profound. I could almost hear the gears of her legal mind grinding against her own greed. Liquidating what she demanded, her tone dropping an octave. "Everything," I whimpered. "They mentioned filial responsibility laws. They are tracing the wire transfers Mother and Father sent over the years. They think family members who received cash gifts might be liable for their current medical debts. They are looking at my house, Valerie. They are looking at your trusts." That was the precise trigger. The mere suggestion that a state agency might touch her shielded wealth sent Valerie into a tailspin of self-preservation. Filial responsibility laws were rarely enforced in this jurisdiction, but fear is a powerful blindfold. She was a litigator who understood the devastating cost of a drawn-out asset defense. "They cannot touch my firm equity," she hissed, her breathing shallow and fast. "Those transfers were gifts. I have zero legal obligation to house or fund 2 bankrupt seniors." "You told me you had this under control, Carenza." "I am trying," I cried, sounding small and desperate. "But the court wants next of kin on the record. If you are listed as an interested party, the auditors will subpoena your financial records by Monday morning." "I am not an interested party," Valerie snapped, the panic overriding her usual composed demeanor. "I am removing myself from this jurisdiction. Do whatever you have to do, Carenza. Put them in a state ward, put them on the street. I do not care. I am sending you a formal, notarized renunciation of all filial rights and claims to their estate. I want my name scrubbed from that docket today. Do not call me again until this is resolved." She hung up before I could reply. I lowered the phone from my ear. The manufactured tears dried instantly, leaving my skin tight. I took a sip of my morning coffee. The dark roast tasted like victory. I met Nia later that afternoon at a quiet espresso bar in downtown Phoenix. The coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries, providing a stark contrast to the cold legal maneuvering sitting between us. I slid a thick document across the wooden table. Valerie utilized a digital notary service just an hour after our phone call. The paperwork arrived in my secure inbox before lunch. Nia picked up the document. She wore a tailored navy blazer, her eyes scanning the paragraphs with forensic precision. She read the clauses Valerie drafted to protect her own wealth. The language was bulletproof. Valerie formally renounced any claim to the familial estate. She waived all rights to dictate medical care, housing, or financial planning for Thomas and Barbara James. She explicitly stated she held no duty of care and accepted zero liability for their current or future debts. "This is a masterpiece of selfishness," Nia murmured, setting the paper down next to her cappuccino. She severed every single tie. She threw them overboard the second she thought her own ship might sink. I traced the rim of my ceramic mug. Our parents spent their entire lives treating her like a deity. I said, my voice low and steady. They mortgaged their house and ruined their credit to fund her luxury lifestyle. And it took one single phone call about a hypothetical audit for her to legally abandon them forever. Ia offered a grim nod, taking a sip of her foam-topped drink. They worshipped the wrong daughter, she stated, and now the only family member left with any legal standing is the one they tried to enslave. The small pebble of legal maneuvering secured my perimeter. Valerie could never intervene. If she ever discovered the truth about the secure facility in the desert, she possessed zero authority to demand their release. She had permanently locked herself out of the equation. While Valerie spent her day protecting her stock portfolios, our parents remained 40 miles away, trapped in a blissful delusion. I received a brief text message from Thomas that evening. The message contained a photograph of the Sun City living room. Stacks of cardboard boxes filled the space. "We are almost finished packing," the text read. "Make sure the guest suite is dusted. Your mother is bringing her good china. We will expect a hot dinner when we arrive tomorrow." I stared at the photograph on my phone screen. They were eager to cross the threshold of my home. They were anticipating a life where I cooked their meals, paid their bills, and absorbed their constant criticisms. They were moving toward a mirage. I did not reply to the text message. Let them dream for one more night. The legal trap was flawless, but the physical transition still required careful execution. I needed to maintain the illusion of compliance until they were securely inside my vehicle. If they suspected anything, they might refuse to leave their property, forcing a messy extraction involving law enforcement. I preferred a quiet, seamless checkmate. The tension shifted from the abstract realm of court orders to the tangible reality of my Chandler home. I walked down the hallway toward the guest bedroom. It was a spacious suite featuring high ceilings and a private bathroom. This was the room my parents believed they would inhabit for the rest of their lives. I pushed the door open. The space was entirely devoid of welcoming touches. There were no fresh linens on the bed. There were no decorative pillows or floral arrangements. Instead, I spent the evening making structural modifications to my own property. I hired a private locksmith earlier in the week to change the hardware on every exterior door of my house. I requested heavy-duty deadbolts. I wanted the locks reinforced with titanium strike plates. I stood in the center of the guest room holding a heavy brass padlock. I secured the handles of the closet doors. I walked into the attached bathroom and locked the cabinets. I was not preparing a sanctuary for my elders. I was fortifying my fortress. When Friday morning arrived, I intended to drive to Sun City, pack their remaining boxes into a moving van, and seat them comfortably in the back of my luxury SUV. I would drive them away from their foreclosed home. But they would never see the inside of this guest room. If they somehow managed to escape the desert facility and return to my property, they would find it impenetrable. I locked the guest bedroom door behind me, twisting the deadbolt until it clicked with a heavy, satisfying thud. The illusion was complete. The stage was set for the final act. Tomorrow, they would learn the true cost of their entitlement. The highway faded from 8 lanes of gridlocked Phoenix traffic down to a narrow 2-lane ribbon of cracked asphalt winding into the deep, arid desert. I navigated my luxury SUV past towering saguaro cacti and jagged red rock formations. The isolation was intentional. I required a location far removed from the manicured golf courses and bustling country clubs my parents frequented. Desert Pines sat 35 miles outside the city limits, hidden behind a sprawling ridge of sandstone. From the outside, the property resembled an exclusive wellness retreat. It boasted smooth stucco walls, a terracotta tile roof, and pristine desert landscaping featuring drought-resistant agave plants. But the underlying architecture told a very different story. The perimeter wall stood 12 feet high, devoid of any structural footholds. The primary entrance gate was forged from heavy iron, requiring a dual authentication keypad to breach. I lowered my window, letting the scorching dry heat seep into the air-conditioned cabin as I pressed the intercom button to announce my arrival. Inside, the lobby smelled of crushed lavender and expensive floor wax. Classical piano music drifted from hidden overhead speakers, masking the unsettling silence of the remote building. The director, a woman named Helen, wore a tailored charcoal skirt suit and a warm, practiced smile. Helen specialized in high-risk memory care. She understood the intricate, brutal realities of Arizona healthcare regulations regarding involuntary holds. Helen guided me down a wide, sunlit corridor. The walls were painted a soothing sage green, decorated with framed landscape photography depicting local canyons. I reached out and pressed my palm against the drywall. It yielded slightly under my fingertips. The walls were subtly padded, designed to prevent injury when patients experienced frantic disorientation. The aesthetic elegance was a clever facade, masking a high-security containment zone. "Notice the doors," Helen said, gesturing toward the end of the hallway. We approached a set of heavy double doors constructed from reinforced steel, but painted to mimic natural oak. "There are no handles on the inside," she explained. "Every exit utilizes a heavy magnetic lock system tied directly to our central security grid. Patients cannot wander into the desert. We also maintain a strict visitation policy. Because your wards are admitted under a Title 14 guardianship, we require your explicit written authorization before any guest is permitted entry. We confiscate all personal communication devices upon intake to prevent predatory scammers from targeting vulnerable residents." I remembered my childhood bedroom. Thomas and Barbara used to remove my wooden door from its hinges whenever I questioned their arbitrary rules, ensuring I possessed zero privacy or sanctuary. Now I was purchasing a permanent room for them, where every physical boundary was regulated by an unbreakable magnetic seal. The symmetry felt poetic. We returned to the director's spacious office. The mahogany desk held a thick stack of admission files. I sat in a plush leather armchair, pulling my encrypted tablet and a sleek silver pen from my briefcase. I did not hesitate. Helen reviewed the digital medical affidavit signed by Dr. Aris. The prominent neurologist had documented severe cognitive decline and extreme physical vulnerability, just as my parents had performed for him. "Your parents are fortunate you caught this progression early," Helen noted, flipping through the dense pages of evidence. "The fire hazard incident you documented is terrifying. Many children live in denial until a fatal accident occurs. Placing them in a high-security memory care unit is the safest, responsible choice for everyone involved." I signed the financial agreements. The facility was exorbitant, billing thousands of dollars per month for their specialized oversight. I did not touch a single penny of my own retirement accounts to cover the invoice. I utilized the capital I preserved by purchasing their distressed residential debt through my blind trust. Their own financial ruin was funding their incarceration. I authorized a lump sum wire transfer covering the first entire year of residency, guaranteeing their spot. As I initialed the final page, the true crushing permanence of the arrangement settled into the quiet room. Once Thomas and Barbara crossed the threshold of Desert Pines, their legal personhood effectively ceased to exist outside these thick stucco walls. Under the specific state codes governing involuntary conservatorship, they possessed zero legal right to demand a discharge. They could scream at the nurses. They could threaten endless lawsuits. They could beg the staff for mercy. None of it would matter. Without me providing a notarized signature of release, they were trapped inside this desert mirage forever. "You are making a very difficult sacrifice," Helen said, placing a gentle hand over my wrist, offering a look of profound sympathy. "So many families fracture under this immense burden. You are a devoted, proactive daughter. You are giving them the gift of safety." I offered a cold, polite smile. The muscles in my face felt tight, hiding the glacial satisfaction blooming in my chest. "I am simply giving them exactly what they earned," I replied. My voice remained smooth and professional, betraying none of the underlying frost. I walked back out into the blistering desert sun. The heat radiated through the leather soles of my designer heels. I climbed into my vehicle and pointed the hood back toward civilization. The drive back to Sun City took nearly an hour, giving me ample time to construct my final performance. The manicured lawns of the retirement community looked intensely artificial after the harsh reality of the rocky desert. I parked in the driveway of the foreclosed home I now secretly owned. I grabbed a stack of flattened cardboard moving boxes from the back seat and walked up to the front porch. Thomas and Barbara were in the living room, arguing over which pieces of fine china to pack into a wooden crate. The floor was littered with crumpled newspaper and clear packing tape. They looked up, expecting me to instantly assist them. "We need more bubble wrap," Barbara demanded, gesturing sharply toward a precarious stack of dinner plates. "And your father insists on bringing his heavy oak desk. You will need to hire professional movers to carry it up the stairs at your Chandler house. I refuse to let him strain his back right before we settle in." I set the fresh cardboard boxes on the dining table. I did not argue about the cumbersome oak desk. I did not point out that my guest suite was currently locked tight with heavy-duty titanium deadbolts. Instead, I projected an aura of bright, cheerful compliance, playing the role of the subservient child one last time. "Do not worry about the heavy furniture, Mother," I said, offering a wide, beaming smile that did not reach my eyes. "The logistics team I arranged handles all the heavy lifting. Just pack your clothing and your personal toiletries in the soft bags. The transport van is arriving first thing tomorrow morning. Moving day is finally here." The morning sun crested over the manicured rooftops of Sun City, casting long, harsh shadows across the concrete driveway. Inside the foreclosed property, the air was thick with the smell of old dust, corrugated cardboard, and suffocating arrogance. Moving day had officially arrived. I stood in the center of the living room holding a roll of packing tape. The space was a chaotic labyrinth of sealed boxes and dismantled furniture. Thomas and Barbara were holding court amidst the wreckage, treating the impending relocation like a royal procession. They did not lift a single finger to assist with the physical labor. Instead, they stood near the kitchen counter, nursing cups of black coffee and barking relentless commands. "Make sure you wrap the porcelain figurines in triple layers of bubble wrap," Barbara instructed, pointing a manicured finger toward a delicate collection of statues. "Those are irreplaceable, Carenza. I want them displayed prominently in your dining room. They will add a touch of class to that sterile house of yours." I tore a strip of tape securing the top of a heavy box. "I will make sure they are handled with the utmost care, Mother," I replied, keeping my voice flat and agreeable. Thomas adjusted his posture, leaning against the granite island. He watched me lift the heavy carton, taking visible pleasure in my physical exertion. "We need to discuss the new daily schedule," he announced, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Breakfast needs to be served by 7:30 sharp. I expect a hot meal, not just cold cereal. Your mother requires her joint supplements precisely at 8. You will need to manage the pill organizers every Sunday evening." I hoisted the box, walking toward the front door. "I understand," I said, offering a brief, obedient nod. "You can finally put that finance degree to some actual use," Barbara chimed in, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "Managing a household budget and tracking our medical appointments will require a lot of organization. Your little corporate job was cute, but this is real work. Taking care of your elders is the only true legacy a daughter can leave." I carried the carton out to the driveway, loading it into the back of a rented commercial transport van. The professional movers I hired were busy securing the heavy furniture. I listened to my parents mock the career that was currently funding their secret bankruptcy. They believed they had successfully broken me. They thought my silence was the ultimate sign of submission. I felt a cold, deep thrill racing through my veins. Their towering hubris was the final nail in their own coffin. A sleek silver sedan pulled up to the curb, parking behind the commercial truck. Nia stepped out of the vehicle carrying a tray of iced coffees. She wore a casual linen shirt and dark denim, projecting an aura of calm capability. She walked up the driveway, handing me a cold beverage. We did not exchange a verbal greeting. We simply shared a brief, profound look. Nia was the silent anchor keeping me grounded to the reality of the situation while my parents spun their toxic delusions. Nia walked into the house, offering polite smiles and deflecting Barbara's immediate criticisms regarding her casual attire. Nia smoothly took over the lighter tasks, packing toiletries and small kitchen appliances, preventing my parents from focusing their undivided attention on me. The major conflict of the morning was a delicate psychological tightrope. I had to maintain the absolute illusion of total surrender until the very last second. Any hesitation, any flash of genuine anger could trigger their paranoia and cause them to refuse to leave the premises. I swallowed my pride, absorbing every insult, every condescending remark, and every ridiculous demand. As the final wooden crate was loaded into the commercial van, a sharp logistical pebble disrupted the flow of the morning. I instructed the hired crew to drive the transport vehicle to the Chandler address. I walked back toward the front porch, holding a set of keys. "The van is fully loaded," I announced to my parents. "You can ride in the passenger cab with the lead driver. He has the air conditioning running. I will follow right behind you in my vehicle." Thomas scoffed, his face twisting into a mask of deep offense. "Absolutely not," he barked, stepping off the porch. "I am not riding in a cramped, filthy commercial truck smelling of sweat and exhaust fumes. We are your parents, Carenza. We require comfort. We are riding in your luxury SUV. The movers can follow us." A brief spark of panic ignited in my chest before quickly transforming into sheer tactical advantage. If they rode in the commercial van, I would have no control over their environment during the journey. If they rode with me, they would be entirely contained within a mobile cell of my own design. "Of course, Father," I said smoothly, lowering my head in a gesture of apology. "I should have realized. My vehicle is parked right over here. Let me open the doors for you." I walked them toward my pristine black SUV. I opened the rear passenger doors, ushering them onto the premium leather seats. Barbara settled into the plush interior, adjusting the climate control vents to her exact preference. Thomas stretched his legs, letting out a loud, satisfied sigh. Before closing the driver's side door, I reached down and casually engaged the integrated child safety locks. The mechanism engaged with a tiny, muted click, securing the rear doors from the inside. Nia stood on the sidewalk watching the scene unfold. She raised her iced coffee in a silent toast, her eyes flashing with grim approval. I climbed into the driver's seat, shifting the transmission into gear. The heavy tires rolled forward, pulling us away from the manicured lawns and stucco facades of the Sun City neighborhood. We merged onto the main arterial road, leaving their foreclosed property behind forever. The atmosphere inside the cabin was suffocatingly triumphant. Barbara could not contain her gloating. She stared out the tinted window, delivering a relentless monologue about her perceived victory. "I spoke with Mrs. Gable yesterday afternoon," Barbara announced, her tone dripping with intense self-satisfaction. She was incredibly envious, Carenza. Her son moved her into a cramped assisted living apartment last year. I made sure to tell her that my daughter was providing a sprawling private estate and full-time personal service. It is about time this family received the respect it deserves. People are finally seeing that we raised you correctly. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather groaning slightly under the pressure of my hands. My heart pounded a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs, but I kept my facial expression entirely blank. I focused my eyes on the white lines of the highway, letting her arrogant words wash over me. "You will need to clear out that home office of yours," Thomas added, adjusting his seatbelt. "I want my reading chair positioned by that large window. You can handle your little spreadsheets at the kitchen counter from now on. The primary spaces belong to us. I will make sure the arrangements meet your expectations," I replied, my voice a calm, mechanical drone. The standard route from their former neighborhood to my property in Chandler took exactly 20 minutes. It required traveling down a busy interstate flanked by massive shopping centers, dense suburban housing developments, and endless rows of palm trees. I did not merge onto the interstate. I took the western bypass, directing the heavy vehicle away from the sprawling metropolitan grid. The first 15 minutes of the drive passed without incident. My parents were too deeply absorbed in their own grand fantasies to notice the subtle shift in our trajectory. They debated whether they should demand I hire a weekly landscaper or force me to maintain the yard work myself. At the 25-minute mark, the scenery outside the tinted windows began to change dramatically. The lush green golf courses and dense commercial plazas evaporated. The towering concrete overpasses vanished. The landscape flattened out, revealing miles of stark, isolated Arizona desert. The vibrant city colors were rapidly replaced by the harsh, muted tones of sun-baked, dirt-dry scrub brush and jagged sandstone ridges. The ambient noise of highway traffic faded away, leaving only the low, powerful hum of the SUV engine and the rushing sound of the climate control system.
Barbara paused her monologue. She blinked, adjusting her designer sunglasses. She leaned forward, pressing her hand against the plush leather of the door panel. Her eyes scanned the barren horizon, searching for familiar landmarks that no longer existed. "Carenza," she said, her voice losing a fraction of its arrogant edge, "this is not the highway to Chandler. Where are you going?" "There was a traffic incident on the main interstate," I lied, smoothly maintaining my speed. "We had to take a detour through the western ridge. It will only add a few minutes to the trip." Thomas grunted in annoyance, crossing his arms over his chest. "You should have checked the navigation system before we left. I do not want to spend my entire morning trapped in a car." The minutes stretched on, feeling like hours. We passed the 35-minute mark. The civilization of Phoenix was completely gone. We were navigating a desolate, two-lane road surrounded by towering saguaro cacti and relentless, unforgiving heat. The isolation was absolute. Barbara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The smug, triumphant smile that had plastered her face all morning began to falter. The deep silence of the desert seemed to seep through the glass, infecting her with a creeping, undeniable sense of dread. She looked out the window, watching the cracked earth blur past. We approached a sudden turnoff, marked only by a discreet, polished bronze plaque embedded in a stone pillar. I tapped the brakes, steering the heavy vehicle onto an unfamiliar private road. The path was lined with imposing 12-foot-high stucco walls, completely devoid of any decorative landscaping. It felt less like a residential driveway and more like a fortified perimeter. Barbara sat up straight, her manicured fingers gripping the edge of the center console. Her breathing quickened. "Carenza," she demanded, her voice rising in pitch, a sharp edge of genuine panic finally breaking through her composed facade. "Where are we? What is this road?" The SUV rounded the final bend, revealing the massive iron gates of desert pines blocking our path. The fortified structure loomed against the red rocks, an inescapable fortress hiding in plain sight. I brought the vehicle to a smooth, complete stop. The trap had officially arrived. The engine idled a low, steady hum beneath the hood of the luxury vehicle. The dual authenticating keypad beside the driver window blinked with a stark red light. I reached out, pressing my thumb against the biometric scanner and typing the secure access code provided by Helen. The heavy iron gates of Desert Pines groaned, echoing across the empty desert canyon. They slowly swung inward, granting us entry to the compound. Barbara pressed her face against the tinted glass. Her pristine cashmere sweater looked stifling in the glaring Arizona sun. "What is this place, Carenza?" she demanded, her voice thin and reedy. "This looks like a hospital. Why are we pulling into a hospital?" I steered the SUV onto the circular aggregate driveway, stopping directly beneath the shaded portico. Two orderlies, dressed in muted blue scrubs, stood near the reinforced glass entrance. They carried electronic tablets, waiting for their scheduled intake. I shifted the transmission into park. The mechanical click resonated through the cabin, sealing our arrival. Thomas leaned forward from the back seat, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson. "Turn this car around right now," he commanded, slamming his fist against the leather center console. "I am not playing games today. We hired movers. We have a schedule. Take us to Chandler immediately, or I swear to God I will cut you out of the family trust." The threat of disownment hung in the chilled air conditioning. A decade ago, that statement would have sent me into a spiral of desperate apologies. Today, it sounded like a hollow joke, delivered by a man who owned nothing. Thomas reached for the door handle, yanking the silver lever. The child safety mechanism held firm. The door refused to budge. He pulled it again, harder, his breathing growing shallow and rapid. "Open this door," he shouted, the veneer of the dignified patriarch cracking instantly. Barbara began to strike the reinforced window with her open palms. "Let us out," she shrieked, turning her frantic gaze toward me.
"What are you doing? You are kidnapping us. I will call the police. I will ruin you." I unbuckled my seatbelt. I turned around in my seat, facing them directly. I did not raise my voice. I did not exhibit a single trace of anger. I looked at the two people who spent 29 years treating me as a disposable asset, and I delivered the forensic truth. "There is no family trust father," I said, keeping my tone even and clinical. "You drained your savings 5 years ago to pay for Valerie's law school tuition. You took out a second mortgage to fund her San Francisco condo. You maxed out 6 premium credit cards to maintain the illusion of wealth at the country club. Your Sun City property defaulted last month. The bank scheduled a foreclosure auction." The color drained from Thomas' face, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray. He stopped pulling the door handle. His eyes darted back and forth, searching for a lie he could not find. "I know about the debt." I continued, resting my arm along the back of the passenger seat. "I know you intended to move into my home and drain my equity to cover your hidden tracks. You thought you could force me to quit my career by fabricating a medical crisis. You left the stove burning. You pretended to forget your own address. You faked a severe mobility issue on the staircase. You gave an award-winning performance of cognitive decay for Dr. Eris." Barbara clamped her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with mounting terror. "We were just tired," she stammered, her voice trembling. "We just needed a little help. You provided the state with undisputed medical evidence of your own mental incompetence," I stated, slicing through her pathetic defense. "I took the neurologist affidavits and filed an emergency petition under Arizona Title 14. The Superior Court reviewed your fabricated symptoms and the impending foreclosure. A judge signed the final decree yesterday morning." I reached into my briefcase resting on the passenger seat and withdrew the thick manila folder containing the judicial orders. I held the documents up, allowing them to see the red electronic stamp of the county clerk. "You are now legal wards of the state," I announced, delivering the boulder. "You possess 0 civil rights. You cannot sign contracts. You cannot access bank accounts. You do not hold the legal authority to choose where you live. I am your permanent, appointed conservator. I am your absolute master. You cannot dictate our lives like this." Thomas sputtered, his chest heaving with exertion. "We are your parents. We demand to be taken to our property. We demand to speak to our attorney." "Your property belongs to me," I corrected, pointing to the ledger in the folder. "I used a blind trust to purchase your defaulted mortgage from the primary lender. I am your sole creditor. I am your landlord. And as of yesterday, I am the sole authorizer of your legal existence. You cannot hire an attorney because you lack the legal capacity to retain counsel. The court declared you incompetent. Your signatures are worthless." Thomas stared at the paperwork, the reality of the legal snare tightening around his throat. "Valerie will tear this apart," he threatened, his voice barely a whisper. "Your sister is a partner. She will rip these documents to shreds and sue you for every penny you own." I offered a tight, humorless smile. "I informed Valerie about your financial ruin yesterday. I suggested the state might trace your cash gifts and hold her liable for your medical debts under filial responsibility laws." I paused, letting the suspense stretch across the quiet cabin. "She panicked," I revealed. "Valerie sent me a notarized legal waiver before lunch. She formally renounced any claim to your estate. She abandoned all rights to dictate your medical care. She legally severed herself from this family to protect her firm equity. She threw you to the wolves the moment she realized you were broke." A profound, suffocating silence filled the vehicle. The golden child, the daughter they worshipped and bankrupted themselves to elevate, had discarded them without a second thought. The betrayal struck them with physical force. Barbara slumped back against the leather seat, staring blankly at the ceiling. Thomas looked out the window, his shoulders trembling. The commercial moving van pulled into the circular driveway, parking a few yards behind my SUV. Nia had redirected the transport crew, bringing only the specific soft bags containing their clothing and approved toiletries. The heavy oak desk and the fragile porcelain figurines remained packed away, heading to a secure storage unit they would never see. Nia stepped out of the van holding a tray of intake documents. She stood on the sun-baked concrete, watching the scene unfold through the windshield. She did not offer a comforting wave. She simply shook her head, a silent acknowledgement of their self-inflicted destruction. I pressed the central unlocking mechanism on the driver console. The child safety locks disengaged with a sharp, metallic snap. The two orderlies stepped forward, pulling the rear passenger doors open from the outside. The blistering desert heat rushed into the cabin, instantly stripping away the cool, artificial comfort. "Welcome to Desert Pines," the lead orderly said, his tone polite but unyielding. "Please step out of the vehicle." Thomas and Barbara did not fight. The forensic truth had shattered their entitlement, stripping away their arrogance and leaving only hollow defeat. They slowly climbed out of the luxury SUV, stepping onto the aggregate concrete. They looked frail and suddenly very old. They did not look back at me. I handed the thick manila folder containing their intake files to the orderly. The paperwork included the paid invoice covering their first year of high-security containment, funded entirely by the distressed debt I purchased from their bank. The orderlies gently guided my parents toward the reinforced glass entrance. The heavy doors slid open on silent tracks. Thomas and Barbara walked into the sterile, opulent lobby of the memory care unit. The glass panels glided shut behind them. I heard the deep, mechanical click of the magnetic locks engaging, sealing the perimeter. They were officially locked inside their new, permanent reality. I shifted the transmission into drive. My foot pressed the accelerator, guiding the heavy vehicle away from the portico. I drove back through the iron gates, watching them close in my rearview mirror. I accelerated down the desolate access road, leaving the fortified walls behind. The jagged sandstone ridges painted a beautiful silhouette against the azure sky. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the scent of sun-baked earth and freedom. The oppressive, suffocating weight of my childhood, the endless demands, the cruel comparisons, the financial extortion, evaporated into the dry desert wind. The chains they forged over 29 years were finally broken. Even the most fortified containment systems possess microscopic vulnerabilities. At Desert Pines, the flaw was human error. 2 days after their initial admission, a junior nursing assistant turned her back to prep a lunch tray, leaving an administrative landline sitting unattended on a medication cart. Barbara seized the plastic receiver. She dialed the only mobile number she had committed to memory since 1998. She reached her golden child. The frantic call lasted less than 40 seconds before the facility staff realized the breach and disconnected the line. But 40 seconds provided ample time for maximum damage. Barbara shrieked into the receiver, claiming she had been abducted, locked inside a desert prison, and held against her will by her own daughter. Valerie did not rush to the facility to comfort her distressed parents. Her immediate reaction was driven entirely by self-preservation. She was a senior corporate partner ascending the hierarchy of a prestigious firm. Her daily existence revolved around optics, leverage, and unblemished public standing. If rumors began circulating that her parents were embroiled in a scandalous kidnapping plot or locked in a state ward, her equity partners would demand answers. Her meticulously crafted reputation required swift containment. She needed the situation eradicated before it reached the public record. She hired a high-priced independent litigator named Richard Caldwell. The legal counterattack arrived at my Chandler home via a certified process server. I was summoned to a mandatory dispute resolution hearing at a neutral mediation center in downtown Phoenix. Arizona law often requires mediation before allowing family members to drag contested guardianship disputes into open probate court. I did not hire a defense attorney. I did not require one. I gathered my documents dressed in a tailored charcoal suit and drove to the mediation center. The conference room was a sterile expanse of frosted glass walls, gray carpet, and polished granite. A retired Superior Court judge, acting as the neutral mediator, sat at the head of the long table. He arranged a stack of blank legal pads projecting an aura of quiet authority. Valerie arrived 5 minutes later. She strode into the room, radiating an intense, practiced fury. She wore a pristine white blazer and carried a designer briefcase, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Caldwell followed closely behind her. He wore a bespoke navy pinstripe suit and a platinum watch that caught the overhead fluorescent lighting. He exuded the practiced confidence of a man accustomed to bullying unrepresented civilians into submission. Valerie sat directly across from me. She did not offer a greeting. Her jaw was tight, her eyes narrowed into dark slits of contempt. She believed she was about to orchestrate my total destruction. The mediator initiated the session, outlining the rules of civil discourse. Caldwell did not wait for the introductory remarks to conclude. He steepled his fingers, resting his elbows on the cool granite surface, and launched his offensive. "We are not here to negotiate," Mr. Caldwell announced, his voice a deep, booming baritone designed to intimidate. My client received a deeply disturbing phone call from her mother, alleging involuntary confinement. We have reviewed the initial intake logs from Desert Pines. You executed a covert transfer, Ms. James. You isolated 2 vulnerable seniors in a lockdown facility without consulting their primary family members. I sat back in my chair, resting my hands flat on the table. I listened to the steady hum of the central air conditioning. "If you do not sign a release authorizing their immediate discharge," Caldwell continued, leaning forward, "we will bypass family court entirely. I will file federal charges for unlawful imprisonment. I will contact the district attorney and pursue elder abuse indictments. I will freeze your financial planning credentials pending a criminal investigation. You will lose your career, your freedom, and your assets. Sign the discharge papers, Carenza, or we will destroy you." The threats hung in the chilled air. Valerie offered a tiny, satisfied smirk. She leaned back, crossing her arms, expecting me to crumble into a weeping mess of apologies, just as I had done throughout my entire childhood whenever she asserted her dominance. I let the silence stretch. I waited until Caldwell shifted in his seat, his brow furrowing in confusion at my lack of reaction. I reached into my leather tote bag and withdrew a thick navy blue folder. I placed it squarely in the center of the polished table. "You are operating under a severe informational deficit, Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice smooth and devoid of any emotional inflection. "My sister hired you to fix a public relations vulnerability, but she neglected to provide you with the actual facts of the case." I opened the folder. I extracted the first stack of papers and slid them across the granite. "Those are the financial audits," I explained, watching Caldwell pick up the sheets. "Thomas and Barbara James are entirely insolvent. They defaulted on their residential mortgage last month. The ledgers indicate they drained their retirement accounts and leveraged their property to the brink of foreclosure to fund Valerie's law school tuition and her luxury condominium in San Francisco. They are destitute." Valerie's smirk faltered. A flush of pink crept up her neck. Caldwell scanned the routing numbers, his professional confidence dimming slightly as he verified the bank seals. I extracted the second stack of documents, sliding them next to the audits. "Those are the medical affidavits," I continued. "My parents staged a kitchen fire and fabricated severe cognitive decline, hoping to force me to quit my job and provide free domestic labor. I took their performance seriously. I scheduled a comprehensive evaluation with Dr. Aris, the premier neurologist in Scottsdale. They enthusiastically acted the part of incompetent, failing seniors for his medical staff. The documents you are holding are the state-certified declarations of their profound mental incapacity, signed by a board-certified specialist." Caldwell flipped through the medical records. His jaw tightened. He looked at the red electronic stamp from the Maricopa County Superior Court. "You petitioned for an ex parte guardianship order based on these files," he muttered, realizing the ironclad nature of the judicial decree. "I did," I confirmed. "I am their permanent appointed conservator. The state granted me sole authority over their domicile and medical care. They are locked in Desert Pines because a judge agreed they are a danger to themselves." Valerie slammed her hand flat against the table. The sharp crack echoed in the sterile room. "That is fraud, Carenza," she spat, her pristine facade crumbling. "You tricked them into failing a medical exam. You manipulated the court. Richard, file an injunction. We will drag her into a deposition and expose this scheme." I looked at my older sister. I saw the same entitled bully who used to steal my savings and demand my obedience. But the dynamic was permanently altered. She held no power here. I reached into the folder one final time. I pulled out a single, pristine sheet of paper. I slid it directly in front of the high-priced litigator. "That will be incredibly difficult to pursue," I stated, maintaining my steady, clinical tone. "Because Valerie lacks the legal standing to file a single motion in this case." Caldwell looked down at the paper. It was the notarized waiver Valerie had signed and emailed to me just days prior. When my sister discovered our parents were bankrupt, I explained, watching the exact moment comprehension dawned in the lawyer's eyes. She assumed the state might hold her liable for their debts under filial responsibility laws. To protect her firm equity, she utilized a digital notary to execute that document. Caldwell read the clauses aloud, his voice losing all its prior thunder. "The undersigned formally renounces any and all claims to the familial estate. The undersigned waives all rights to dictate medical care, housing, or financial planning. The undersigned accepts zero liability and officially recuses herself from all duties regarding Thomas and Barbara James." He stopped reading. The silence in the mediation room was deafening. Caldwell looked at the electronic signature, time-stamped and officially filed with the county clerk. He turned his head slowly, looking at his client. Valerie had lied to him by omission. She hired him to mount a fierce legal rescue mission without disclosing she had already legally abandoned the captives to save her own bank accounts. By pursuing a frivolous challenge against a lawful state-ordered conservatorship where his own client had expressly waived her rights, Caldwell was risking steep judicial sanctions and a potential strike against his bar license. He was a shark, but he was not suicidal. Caldwell neatly stacked the financial audits, the medical records, and the notarized waiver. He slid them back across the table toward me. He stood up, brushing a piece of invisible lint from his pinstripe trousers. He snapped the golden clasps of his briefcase shut. "We are done here," Caldwell announced, his tone frigid. He did not look at Valerie. "I cannot represent a client who fundamentally misrepresents her legal standing and conceals binding, notarized waivers from her own counsel. You will receive my final invoice for today's session by tomorrow morning. Richard." Valerie gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "You cannot just leave. You work for me." "I work for the preservation of my legal license," he corrected, turning toward the glass door. "Good afternoon, Ms. James." He walked out of the conference room without a backward glance. Valerie sat frozen in her expensive white suit. The tiny micro-expressions crossing her face were a symphony of realization and defeat. Her eyes darted from the closed door back to the navy blue folder resting under my hands. She understood the depths of my architecture. She realized she had been completely outmaneuvered, forced into a corner of her own selfish design. She stood up, grabbing her designer bag. Her hands shook with a potent mixture of rage and humiliation. "You are a sociopath," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "I am an asset planner," I corrected softly. "I just reorganized the family portfolio." Valerie stormed out of the mediation center, leaving the heavy glass door shuddering in her wake. She abandoned her parents for a second time, sealing their fate to protect her pride. The retired judge sitting at the head of the table watched the departure with a calm, neutral expression. He picked up his pen and signed the official mediation summary declaring the dispute formally closed. The challenge was dismissed. My authority remained absolute, unquestionable, and permanent. The Arizona state statutes mandate a monthly physical visitation by the appointed conservator to ensure the continued welfare of the wards. I scheduled my required appearance for the second Tuesday of November. The desert heat had finally surrendered to a crisp autumn chill. I parked my luxury SUV in the visitor lot of Desert Pines, feeling the cool breeze against my skin. I wore a tailored camel hair coat I purchased the day prior, celebrating a significant promotion at my firm. My career was thriving, fueled by the sudden absence of familial extortion. I walked through the dual-authenticated iron gates. The lobby maintained its opulent facade, smelling of fresh-cut lilies and sterile citrus floor polish. Helen, the facility director, greeted me with a warm professional nod before escorting me toward the high-security memory care wing. The recreation room was a sprawling, sunlit expanse designed to mimic a high-end resort lounge. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered unobstructed views of the enclosed central courtyard, where drought-resistant plants bloomed under the clear sky. The glass, however, was reinforced polycarbonate, and the exterior doors were sealed shut. It was a beautiful, gilded cage. I found Thomas and Barbara sitting at a circular mahogany table in the far corner. They wore matching gray cardigans provided by the facility laundry service. The pristine, tailored clothing they used to flaunt at the country club was replaced by practical, standardized garments lacking belts or sharp zippers. I pulled out a plush, upholstered chair and sat across from them. I set my steaming cup of dark roast coffee on the table. Neither of them offered a greeting. Barbara glared at me, her eyes harboring a dark, simmering resentment. Thomas refused to make eye contact, staring out the reinforced window at the artificial courtyard. The interpersonal dynamic had shifted entirely. The battlefield was now one-sided. They held zero ammunition, and I controlled the entire arsenal. "You need to pack our things," Barbara hissed, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "We have been in here for 30 days, Carenza. The joke is over. You made your point, you proved you hold the power. Now sign the discharge papers and take us home." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter, rich flavor. I set the ceramic cup down, resting my hands in my lap. "I am not making a point, Mother," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly mild. "I am fulfilling my legal obligation as your state-appointed guardian. You are receiving premium 24-hour supervision." "This place is a prison," Thomas snapped, turning his head to face me. The hollow exhaustion in his eyes betrayed his fragile bravado. "The nurses dictate every single hour of our day. They force us out of bed at 7 in the morning. They mandate our meal times. They monitor our sodium intake. We cannot even take a walk outside without a staff member trailing 5 feet behind us." The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. "They lock the doors at 8 in the evening," Barbara chimed in, her voice cracking with genuine distress. "We are subjected to mandatory wellness checks every 2 hours throughout the night. They open our room just to shine a flashlight on our faces. We have zero privacy. We have zero autonomy. We cannot live like this." I looked at the two people who spent my entire life trying to micromanage my existence. They were currently describing the exact domestic nightmare they had intended to force upon me. "You are experiencing the precise level of care you demanded." I pointed out, my voice steady and clinical. "When you marched into my office last month, you insisted on a strict daily regimen. You ordered me to monitor your joint supplements, prepare your hot meals on a rigid schedule, and supervise your every movement. You wanted a warden. You simply expected me to sacrifice my $140,000 career to play the role for free." "We wanted our daughter," Thomas argued, his fists clenching on the tabletop. "We wanted the respect and dignity of living in our own house." "You do not own a house," I reminded him, delivering the reality check with surgical precision. "Your Sun City property was foreclosed. If I had not purchased your defaulted debt through a blind trust and used the preserved capital to fund this facility, you would be sitting on a public sidewalk right now. You bankrupted yourselves to fund Valerie's luxury lifestyle. This high-security ward is the only safety net keeping you off the streets." The mention of my older sister acted as a spark hitting dry kindling. "Valerie will fix this," Barbara declared, lifting her chin in a pathetic display of recycled arrogance. "We used the nursing station phone last week. We told her everything. She is a senior litigator. She is drafting the lawsuit right now. She will drag you into court, shred your fraudulent guardianship orders, and bring us back to civilization. You will spend the rest of your life paying damages for this kidnapping." I felt a genuine, relaxed smile spread across my face. The sheer delusion required to maintain their faith in the Golden Child was staggering. They refused to see the truth even when it was locked in a concrete room with them. "Valerie did hire a lawyer," I confirmed, watching their eyes light up with sudden, desperate hope. She retained a very expensive independent litigator named Richard Caldwell. He summoned me to a mandatory mediation hearing in downtown Phoenix last week. He threatened me with federal charges and elder abuse indictments. Thomas leaned forward, a triumphant sneer forming on his lips. "I knew it," he crowed. "Your sister is going to destroy you." I let him enjoy the fantasy for 3 seconds before dismantling it. Mr. Caldwell resigned during the mediation, I stated, watching the triumph drain from my father's face. He packed his briefcase and walked out of the room. Because Valerie lied to him. "What do you mean she lied?" Barbara whispered, her hands trembling against the mahogany table. "Valerie received the official court notice regarding your financial ruin," I explained, maintaining a steady, unwavering gaze. "She realized you possessed 0 assets. She feared the state might audit her trusts and hold her responsible for your medical debts. So she utilized a digital notary to execute a binding legal waiver. She formally renounced all claims to your estate. She abandoned all rights to dictate your medical care. She legally severed her ties to you to protect her own wealth." "No," Thomas croaked, shaking his head. "You are lying. She would never do that." "She did," I affirmed. And when Mr. Caldwell read the signed waiver, he realized he had no legal standing to challenge my authority. He dropped her as a client on the spot. Barbara opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. She looked at her husband, seeking reassurance. He could not provide. "If you do not believe me," I suggested softly, "you are welcome to call her and ask, though you might find it difficult to reach her." I paused, letting the silence stretch across the sunlit room. "Valerie changed her contact parameters yesterday morning," I revealed. "She blocked both of your numbers. She instructed her reception desk to screen all incoming calls from this facility prefix. She has entirely walled you off. She does not want to hear from you ever again." The profound, crushing reality of their isolation finally settled over the table. The golden idol they worshipped had turned her back on them, leaving them stranded in the desert. They had discarded me their entire lives, viewing me as an expendable resource. Now, the only person on earth who held the legal authority to authorize their release was the very daughter they had tried to destroy. A heavy, suffocating despair washed over my parents. Thomas slumped forward, resting his face in his hands. Barbara stared blankly at the reinforced window, a silent tear tracing a path down her cheek. They had nothing left to say. There were no more threats to hurl, no more guilt trips to leverage. The battle was over. I finished the last sip of my coffee. I pushed the chair back and stood up. I smoothed the lapels of my tailored camel hair coat, feeling the soft, expensive fabric against my fingers. It was a tangible reminder of the independence I had fought so fiercely to protect. "I will return next month for my mandated visit," I told them, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet corner of the lounge. "Enjoy the scheduled activities. I hear the music therapy session at 3 o'clock is very relaxing." They did not look up. They remained frozen in their chairs, 2 defeated prisoners, mourning the loss of a kingdom that never truly existed. I turned and walked across the recreation room, navigating past the other residents. I reached the exit corridor. The lead orderly pressed a button on the security console. The heavy double doors clicked, granting me passage. I stepped through the threshold. The steel panels glided shut behind me. The magnetic locks engaged with a deep, definitive thud, sealing my parents inside their inescapable reality. I walked down the padded hallway, leaving them entirely behind. The November air carried a crisp, refreshing chill, signaling the final surrender of the punishing Arizona summer. I sat on the expansive sandstone patio of my Chandler home, watching the sun dip below the jagged silhouette of the distant mountains. The sky shifted into bruised shades of violet, burnt orange, and deep indigo. The desert wind rustled through the fronds of the potted palm trees, creating a soft, rhythmic whisper. It was quiet, the kind of deep, undisturbed quiet I had never been permitted to experience growing up. I rested my hands on the cool glass surface of the patio table. I focused on the physical sensations of my freedom. I was not standing in a cramped kitchen, measuring out precise doses of joint supplements for people who despised me. I was not enduring a relentless barrage of criticisms regarding my posture, my clothing, or my career choices. I was not watching my hard-earned bank accounts drain to zero to fund a luxury ground-floor addition. My guest suite remained entirely empty, its heavy titanium deadbolts serving as a silent monument to a battle won. My financial portfolios were secure, expanding steadily with the favorable market conditions. The distressed debt I purchased from the bank holding their foreclosed Sun City property was officially settled. I allowed the primary lender to proceed with the public auction. A commercial developer purchased the lot for a premium price. Because my anonymous blind trust held the paper, the surplus proceeds from the sale routed directly into my corporate accounts. I did not keep a single penny of their money. I wired the entire sum directly into the escrow account at Desert Pines. Their own liquidated estate was now funding their permanent high-security care. It was a closed loop of undeniable forensic justice. The sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway broke the peaceful silence. I heard the heavy wooden side gate unlatch. Marcus and Nia walked onto the patio, illuminated by the soft amber glow of the outdoor string lights. Nia wore a tailored trench coat, holding a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir. Marcus carried a white bakery box tied with baker's twine, smelling faintly of dark chocolate and toasted almonds. They did not look like hostages of a toxic family dynamic anymore. Marcus looked noticeably lighter. The chronic tension that used to pull his shoulders up toward his ears had vanished. "We brought the good wine," Naya announced, setting the dark bottle on the table. "You only get named regional director once. We intend to celebrate properly." I smiled, feeling a genuine warmth spread through my chest. Yesterday morning, Gregory Holden summoned me to his corner office. He did not ask for a portfolio review. He offered me the promotion of a lifetime. He handed me the title of regional director, accompanied by a 40% salary increase. He stated that any financial planner who could surgically neutralize a hostile extortion attempt without violating a single state law was exactly the kind of architect he wanted running his entire Southwest division. My career was no longer just my armor. It was my empire. Marcus walked over to the stone fire pit situated at the edge of the patio. He struck a long wooden match, tossing it onto the stacked cedar logs. The dry wood caught instantly, sending a shower of bright orange sparks dancing into the twilight. "I brought glasses," I said, retrieving 3 crystal stems from the outdoor kitchen counter. Nia uncorked the wine, pouring the rich crimson liquid. We gathered around the warmth of the fire pit, settling into the plush, oversized cushions of the patio chairs. The cedar smoke smelled earthy and grounding. I spoke with the facility administrator this morning. Marcus said, keeping his gaze fixed on the dancing flames, Helen confirmed they are adjusting to the routine. They tried to organize a resident protest regarding the strict 8 o'clock curfew, but they forgot to write down the details and missed the meeting. They are safe, Carenza. They are fed. They are supervised. They have everything they need, I replied, taking a slow sip of the wine. They just lack the one thing they crave most: control. Marcus nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us. He spent his entire life blending into the background, desperate to avoid the crosshairs of their manipulation. He watched them elevate Valerie into a deity while treating me like a disposable resource. "I am sorry I never fought them alongside you," Marcus murmured, the firelight casting long shadows across his face. "I saw what they were doing to you. I saw how they demanded your time and your money while excusing Valerie from every single obligation. I just kept my head down. I was a coward." I reached across the space, resting my hand on his arm. "You survived the only way you knew how, Marcus. They engineered this family to operate in silos. They isolated us to prevent a unified front. You do not owe me an apology. The toxic core of this family has been excised. We are the only ones left, and we are fine." Nia leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine in her glass. "Has anyone heard from the golden child?" she asked, her tone laced with dark amusement. "Not a word," I confirmed. Valerie changed her email address. She blocked my number. She severed every tether to the state of Arizona. She is a ghost. She ran from the imaginary threat of a state audit abandoning the parents who ruined their own lives to build hers. She will spend the rest of her life guarding her wealth, terrified that someone might ask her for a favor. I looked into the fire, thinking about the terrified teenager I used to be. I remembered the girl who scrubbed dorm bathrooms, inhaling toxic bleach fumes just to pay for textbooks. I remembered the heavy, suffocating panic that gripped my throat when they marched into my office demanding I resign from my life. They believed they were the architects of my destruction. They believed the societal expectations of elder care duty would force me into total submission. They tried to weaponize the Arizona legal system against me. They fabricated a medical crisis, intending to prove I was negligent if I refused to serve them. But they fundamentally misunderstood the sterile, unyielding nature of the law. Arizona Title 14 was designed to protect vulnerable seniors from harm. I simply took my parents at their word. I utilized their own fictional performances to trigger the rigid statutes. I fed the judicial machine the exact data they provided, and it produced an inescapable outcome. I gave them exactly what they asked for. I provided them with a safe, secure environment. They are housed. They are medically monitored. They are protected from their own financial incompetence. And they will never dictate a single aspect of my existence ever again. The justice I orchestrated was cold, logical, and executed entirely within the boundaries of modern American social reality. I did not need to scream. I did not need to hurl insults or beg for their elusive love. I just needed to secure the perimeter and let their towering hubris trigger the snare. Nia raised her crystal glass, the firelight refracting through the stem. To setting boundaries, she proposed, her voice ringing clear and steady in the quiet desert night. To the power of reading the fine print, and to the regional director, to reading the fine print, Marcus echoed, raising his glass to join hers. I raised my wine, the rim clinking against theirs with a sharp, resonant chime. I drank, savoring the complex, layered notes of the vintage. The heat of the fire warmed my skin. The heavy, oppressive chains of my past lay shattered in the dust miles away, locked behind heavy magnetic doors. I sat on my patio, surrounded by the family I chose, breathing in the cool night air. I was the architect of my own liberation, and the view from the top was breathtaking. The desert, with its endless expanse of sun-baked earth and profound ancient silence, is a landscape of absolute truth. It strips away illusions, leaving only what is resilient enough to survive. When we reflect upon Kerenza's journey, a masterclass in cold forensic liberation, we are not merely looking at a story of tactical revenge. We are looking into a mirror held up to the fractured soul of the modern family. Her story transcends the boundaries of a simple family feud. It is a profound spiritual and cultural reckoning. It asks us to examine the very foundation of what it means to raise a child, to honor a parent, and to cultivate a life of genuine meaning in a society that so often confuses wealth with worth and duty with debt. To the mothers and fathers navigating the complex, highly competitive landscape of the modern American family, this narrative serves as a devastating warning. In our culture, there is a dangerous temptation to treat parenting as a transactional enterprise. We see parents like Thomas and Barbara, who invest heavily in the golden child, valuing prestige, elite degrees, and country club status, while treating their other children as insurance policies, domestic servants, or safety nets. This is the antithesis of traditional family education. A family is not a diversified corporate portfolio. True parenting requires the rigorous application of honesty, fairness, and profound emotional awareness. When parents play favorites, when they weaponize guilt and societal expectations to extract unpaid labor and financial sacrifice from one child to subsidize another, they are not building a legacy. They are building a prison. A traditional family structure thrives only when it is anchored in unconditional love and moral integrity. If you demand respect simply because of your biological title, while actively undermining your child's independence and emotional well-being, you are planting seeds of deep, irreversible resentment. You cannot cultivate a garden of loyalty if you are continuously salting the earth. From the quiet vantage point of a spiritual practitioner, one who seeks to observe the natural laws of cause and effect, Kerenza's story is a profound commentary on the spiritual sickness of our modern society. We live in a world heavily attached to external validation, where people will eagerly bankrupt their own souls just to maintain a wealthy facade for their neighbors. The Taoist philosophy of self-cultivation teaches us that the only true path to a good life is through Tu Su Chin Min, the relentless, honest correction of oneself. When we refuse to look inward, when we refuse to cultivate our own morality, we inevitably project our chaos onto our children. Thomas and Barbara lacked the spiritual discipline to face their own financial and moral failings, choosing instead to manipulate, lie, and steal the life force of their daughter. For a society to heal, individuals must prioritize internal cultivation to develop 3 essential pillars: wisdom, to see the truth beyond societal illusions; morality, to treat others with fundamental human dignity; and resilience, to face the consequences of one's own actions. Without these, even the grandest house is built on sinking sand. For the young adults, the designated caretakers, and the quiet scapegoats who bear the invisible weight of their family's shadow. Kerenza's journey is a masterclass in survival and spiritual fortitude. The message to you is clear. True filial piety does not require you to become a human sacrifice on the altar of your parents' dysfunction. Honoring your origins does not mean you must allow yourself to be consumed by them. Kerenza teaches us that true resilience and wisdom are often forged in the fires of our deepest abandonments. She did not win her freedom by screaming, crying, or begging for a love that her parents were entirely incapable of giving. She won by cultivating a mind of absolute clarity. She assessed her reality with cold, unvarnished truth. Young people today must understand that establishing ironclad boundaries is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound self-respect and spiritual preservation. To live a better life, you must have the courage to read the fine print of the relationships around you. You must cultivate the inner strength to step away from toxicity, even when society, culture, or tradition tells you that you are obligated to stay. You cannot save people who are actively trying to drown you. You can only build a boat strong enough to carry yourself to safer shores. The tragedy of the James family is that it did not have to end behind the magnetic locks of a high-security facility. Had there been even a fraction of honesty, a sliver of fairness, or a moment of genuine emotional awareness, the entire catastrophe could have been avoided. But the universe is a flawless accountant. It keeps a meticulous ledger of how we treat one another. Kerenza simply balanced the books, utilizing the exact system her parents sought to weaponize against her. She transformed their arrogant demands for total control into the very mechanism of their permanent containment. If this narrative resonates with the silent war you have been fighting, if it validates a hidden wound you have carried for far too long, you are not alone. There is immense power in acknowledging the truth of our family dynamics, no matter how dark or uncomfortable they may be. We invite you to join our community and subscribe to Mourning Revenge. Share your stories in the comments below, and let us continue to illuminate the quiet, calculated strength of those who refuse to be broken by the people who were supposed to protect them. Conventional society dictates that the ultimate tragedy is a fractured family, that walking away from one's parents, or, in Kerenza's case, legally neutralizing them, is an unforgivable sin against the natural order. We are taught that blood is thicker than water, and that family must be preserved at any cost. But I offer a different truth, a philosophy that challenges the very core of our traditional domestic conditioning. Perhaps the truest form of justice and the most terrifying manifestation of love is simply allowing people to fully experience the exact reality they maliciously designed for someone else. When Kerenza locked those doors, she did not destroy her family. She crystallized it. She took the transactional, loveless, controlling dynamic her parents had cultivated for 29 years, and she simply gave it a physical address. Sometimes the most profound spiritual act we can commit is not forgiveness, but absolute, flawless reflection. Look closely at the walls you are building around the people you claim to love. Are they meant to shelter them, or are they meant to trap them? Because one day you may find that you are the one standing on the inside, listening to the lock engage.